Chapter 5:15. Even Dake himself hadn't received such treatment in his past classes. 3 teachers and a parent were distributing the test papers on the podium, and they were distributing the test papers from the lowest score. In the past, when they were particular about reducing burden and advocated not announcing the results, this kind of behavior was simply going against the trend. However, magic guide elves were different from real human children. Their tolerance was far stronger than human children. In a day of 24 hours, under normal circumstances, they would be full of energy after 2 hours of sleep. Even if they didn't sleep for 24 hours, they would still be able to maintain their basic state. Of course, only maintaining the most basic state wasn't suitable for learning. When Dake walked past the podium, he slightly nodded toward the magic guide elves, then sat down at the corner and began to watch. And the magic guide elves were secretly looking at him. There were those who were full of confidence like Fairy Ibu, and there were also those who were guilty and timid like little Snorlax. But little Snorlax was after all just born, so even if its results weren't good, it was still pardonable. Remember in 1 second. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. Just when Dake was thinking like this, Madam Cook, as the head of the tutors, opened her mouth and said, "It has been more than a month since I started teaching you. Although you aren't human, you are more intelligent than some of the human children I taught in the past, and most of the students are very hardworking. I always believe that hard work pays off. Hardworking people will always get what they want." The preamble ends here, and now I will announce the results, starting from the last place. As soon as she finished speaking, the atmosphere in the classroom instantly stagnated. The magic guide elves didn't expect that the highlight would come so early and so suddenly. Compared to the first place, they obviously cared more about who the last place was. After all, it was the most shameful, and also the one who needed the most sympathy. Even before Madam Cook announced the results, most of the magic guide elves had already focused their attention on little Snorlax and Trash Slime. Little Snorlax was just born, and it was gluttonous and sleepy, so its results were pardonable. Trash Slime's intelligence level wasn't high. Even if it was improved with the help of Madam Plant, it was still at the bottom. Without a doubt, the two of them were the strongest contenders for the last place. Little Snorlax was still licking its fingers with a silly and cute face under everyone's gaze, while Trash Slime was subconsciously shrinking towards the direction of the polymorph monster. Who will be the last one? When Ms. Cook pulled out the first paper, everyone's eyes shifted to the podium. It was as if an award had just been unveiled. Ms. Cook glanced at the sight in her hand. Then, with a stern look, she knocked on the silly little Snorlax and said, "Now the result will be revealed. The last one, little Snorlax, score, 0 points. 0 points? X. And the classroom was suddenly filled with a lot of noise. Although the fact that little Snorlax won the last place was within expectations, perhaps no one would have thought that it didn't get a single point. But why was it able to eat so happily and sleep so soundly when it didn't get a single point? Endless doubt appeared in the eyes of the magic guide fairies. Even Dark couldn't help but be stunned. This little Snorlax didn't have the thick fat characteristic. Busy? Little Snorlax was biting its finger. It was puzzled by the strange gazes of its family members. Cough. Dake couldn't help but ask, "If I remember correctly, there are 4 subjects in this exam, and each subject is worth 100 points, right?" "Yes," Ms. Cook said seriously. "These 4 subjects are reading and writing, arithmetic, common sense, and history." "Which is literature, mathematics, nature, and history." Dake nodded. This was indeed in line with his teaching requirements. But since it was such a configuration, how could it get a 0? Could it be a blank paper? In his impression, except for a person called Nobita, there should be very few people who could master this special skill, right? "Let me have a look at the test paper," Dake said to Ms. Cook. Ms. Plant, who was standing at the side, took the paper and handed it to him. Dake took the paper and flipped through it slightly. Then his face gradually turned gloomy. Little Snorlax's learning progress was faster than he expected. At least, it could write its own name in a decent way. Moreover, it could also use some phonetic symbols to replace the words that it couldn't write. But it was precisely because of this that the problem was big. Because in this case, it couldn't be illiterate, as the reason why it got a 0. Especially in the arithmetic paper, there were such things as 13 plus 14 equals. But its answer was 1,314. 13 plus 14 is equal to 1,314? Dake continued to read and found that in the question and answer at the back, in addition to some random scribbles, there were also crooked pictures of food. This is the problem of the attitude. He closed the paper and said to the audience, "Little Snorlax, come up and take the paper." Caw. Little Snorlax snorted. It lay down on the chair and walked to Dake happily. Dake handed the paper to it and said decisively, "From today onwards, your food will be halved." Little Snorlax, caw. Its mouth was wide open, and its whole body was stuck. But Dake Dimming never lied. "I will let the teachers grade your learning attitude after the lesson, and then decide the food standard for the next day according to the score. With 5 points as the standard, 10 kilograms of food will be added for every extra point, and 10 kilograms of food will be deducted for every less point. The maximum score is 12 points. Do you have any objections?" Little Snorlax quickly raised its hands and said loudly, "Caw, caw, caw." "Dake, come. It's good that you don't have any objections, you can go first." Therefore, little Snorlax hugged the paper and turned into a statue. Dake's punishment made the atmosphere more and more tense. Ms. Cook took out the second paper and said, "The second from the bottom, which is the 19th place," speaking until here. She glanced at the audience and said sternly, "Single Scabbard, come up and take the paper." Caw. The single scabbard that was leaning on the chair suddenly let out a broken sound, as if the scabbard was suddenly broken. And the garbage slime that was sitting at the same table as the monster suddenly became spirited, and its soft body straightened up. Perhaps no one would have thought that the garbage slime was not the second from the bottom. The single scabbard swayed and floated to the podium. It turned the ribbon into a palm and held the paper, and then carefully peeped at its master's reaction. However, Dake didn't say much like he did to Snorlax, and only looked at it with a dull gaze. Therefore, its flight path became even more messy. The 18th place. Ms. Cook took out the third paper and looked at the audience. The expression of the magic elves became tense. Little Snorlax's 0 points had broken through the lower limit, and the single scabbard's second from the bottom made people wake up. No one wanted to be the third person to be surpassed by the garbage slime. However, the gap between those who worked hard and those who slacked off had been gradually widened when they did that. The 18th place cyan-eyed baby dragon. The baby dragon, who was holding its head, walked up to the podium with its head lowered. Its cheeks were red, and even its scales were dyed red. It picked up the paper and hurriedly ran away. As the incarnation of pride, the cyan-eyed baby dragon's arrogance was hidden deep in its heart. On the surface, it was obedient, but it was just a pure attribute that was given to it by the baby dragon. It didn't study seriously. Even after little Snorlax was born, it formed a gluttonous and sleepy bottom 2 team with it. Even in this stage test, it felt that it was good as long as it wasn't at the bottom. However, this laziness made it become the bottom 3. The magic elf's piercing gazes made its whole body ache. Its thick dragon scales and extremely high 3 measurements were unable to stop the penetrating gazes. The arrogance hidden deep in its heart was finally stimulated. It secretly swore in its heart that it must listen to the class seriously. Dake observed the single scabbard and the cyan-eyed baby dragon nodding. "No shame, and you can make progress. No shame and be brave." After the bottom 3, it was the 17th place. When Madam Cook took out the 4th paper, a satisfied smile appeared on her face. Although the result of the 17th place wasn't ideal, compared to the student's own ability, this was already a great improvement. She raised her head and said to the garbage slime, "The 17th place slime, polymorph, come up and help it take the paper." Busy. The polymorph suddenly jumped 3 feet high. It was even happier than getting the first place. Although the result of the 17th place wasn't much, the garbage slime's previous level was one of a kind. Now not only did it make great progress, it also got rid of the fate of being at the bottom. Naturally, it was worth celebrating. Pa. Dake suddenly applauded. Well done. Using his applause as an opportunity, The magic elves who were surprised by the garbage slime's result also applauded. Suddenly, the applause was like thunder, resounding in the classroom. The garbage slime couldn't help but stand up, the tentacles that squeezed out from its body clenched into small fists. It was so happy to have succeeded in learning. It had to continue to work hard. After the applause subsided, Miss Cook began to distribute the next paper. After that, the 16th place, Moon Lady. Miss Cook looked at the moon god's soul and reminded her again. Moon Lady, come up and take the paper. The moon god's soul, whose body was stiff like a rusty screw, walked up to the podium with her hands and feet. Even if she didn't care about the so-called learning, she couldn't accept that she, who would become a god sooner or later, actually ended up in the 16th place in a class with only 20 students. 16th place, only one place higher than the garbage slime. The path from the seat to the podium was like a path of thorns. Every step she took pierced the soles of her feet, dripping with blood. This was simply humiliating. As expected, this method of announcing the results is extremely destructive to people with strong self-esteem. Let's see if you can still slack off now. Dake narrowed his eyes and observed the moon god's soul's stiff expression, the little person in his heart jumping like a little apple. Magic elves and human children had temperaments that were no different. Not all magic elves liked to learn. As a parent, he had to guide them on the relatively correct path. There was nothing wrong with learning. After a few minutes, there were finally only 3 papers left on the podium. The magic elves couldn't help but perk up their ears. Although they paid the most attention to who was in the last place, they were also quite interested in who was in the first place. Dake looked at the last 3 magic elves and couldn't help but reveal a satisfied smile. So far, the results of the other 17 magic elves had been announced. Among them, the 15th to the 11th place were Phoenix Girl, Hawkman Wrestling, Vampire's Daughter, Chio Sea Lion, Dream Demon. The 10th to the 6th place were Meow Meow, Kettle Kettle, Variety Monster, Magician Secretary, Big Milk Can. The 5th place was Ivan. The 4th place was Lion Beast. The remaining 3 magic elves were Diru Beast, Fairy Ivan, and Little Fiend Beast. From this, it could be seen. The results of Phoenix Girl and Vampire's Daughter were still not ideal. Ever since the Hawkman Wrestling shifted its focus to physical training and martial arts training, its results had been steadily declining. And Dream Demon's results had steadily improved after mastering the drug learning method. As for Chio Sea Lion's ranking falling, in fact, the results of the top 10 places weren't very different. Overall, there was a huge improvement. In comparison, Meow Meow's results had indeed declined. This had a lot to do with it shifting part of its energy to the support of armament refinement. In addition, the Magician Secretary's results were unexpectedly not outstanding. It had already slipped from the first echelon to the second echelon. It could be seen that after everyone worked hard to memorize the necessary basic knowledge, its advantage gradually disappeared. On the other hand, Huahua, Changeable Monster, and Big Milk can maintain stable results. In addition, the Lion Beast had caught up and surpassed Abuchan. This had a lot to do with its tenacious character. Ivan, who had been ranked 3rd in the final exam, was now very disappointed. As for the remaining 3 magic elves, they were the Diru Beast, who had been ranked 1st and 2nd in the final exam, and Little Fiend Beast, who had been ranked 6th at that time. It seemed that after Little Fiend Beast's only proud result had been surpassed, it had also honestly worked hard. However, it was still unclear who would be ranked 1st in the final exam. Dake looked expectantly at the podium. Ms. Cook separated the last 3 test papers, then took out 3 medals with big red flowers hanging on them and slightly showed them to the audience. These 3 medals were gold, silver, and bronze respectively. They were additional rewards for this stage of the exam. For this kind of exam, a substantial medal that could be collected was actually very important. After seeing the medal, the winner would want to continue winning. After seeing the medal, the loser would also want to have one. Diru Beast, Fairy Ivan, and Little Fiend Beast, come to the podium. Ms. Cook faintly smiled and prepared to hold a small award ceremony. This way, the magic elves would have a deeper impression of it. The 3 magic elves looked in the direction of Dake at the same time, then walked to the podium. The Diru Beast was as calm as before, but its eyes revealed arrogance. Fairy Ivan held its head high, but the tip of its ribbon antenna was slightly trembling, showing its nervousness. Little Fiend Beast flew over in the air with a proud expression. Clearly, for Little Fiend Beast, getting into the top 3 was a victory. Fairy Ivan, on the other hand, was aiming for first place, so it was quite nervous. But no matter what, it was time to enjoy the harvest. The other magic elves looked at them enviously, and most of them were motivated to work harder. After waiting for the 3 magic elves to come to the podium, Ms. Cook thought for a bit, then picked up the test papers on the table, and let them come to the podium. Then she gave the test papers and the trophy to the other 2 professors, and began the award ceremony. Ms. Plant looked at the names on the test papers, and revealed a trace of a smile. Then she picked up the bronze medal and walked over. The magic elves looked at her nervously. In a situation where they were guaranteed to get into the top 3, no one wanted this bronze medal. But Ms. Plant didn't stop, and finally walked in front of Little Fiend Beast. Although Little Fiend Beast was a bit disappointed, having a medal was better than not having one, right? Thus, it wrapped its wings around the medal, and then hung it on the tip of its wings, holding it high. Very good. Ms. Plant smiled. Congratulations to Little Fiend Beast for getting 3rd place in this exam. I hope you can continue to work hard. Of course. Little Fiend Beast smiled proudly. Do you see this medal? This is the proof of the strong. As for me, the little devil beast, I only had to put in a bit of effort to obtain it. The originally sparse applause suddenly stopped. The magic elves looked suspiciously at Little Fiend Beast, who was very proud of himself, and didn't say anything. But Little Fiend Beast wasn't affected by the outside world at all, and continued to talk nonstop. So what does this mean? It means that everyone here is benevolent. Of course, I won't say that out loud. Everyone, you must keep an eye on my butt and work hard. Cough. Now let's invite Teacher Cyrus to present the medal to the 2nd place. Ms. Cook hurriedly covered it with her voice. Sage Cyrus also stood up with the silver medal and the test papers. He looked at Little Fiend Beast with interest, and Little Fiend Beast felt a chill all over, and subconsciously stopped talking. Cyrus smiled faintly and walked toward them. The other magic elves' attention was finally successfully diverted. The ownership of the 2nd medal actually meant that the 1st place would be missed, so all the magic elves focused their attention. Cyrus looked back and forth between Fairy Ibu and the Dilu Beast, and discovered that in the depths of these 2 4-star magic elves' eyes, there was a trace of nervousness and expectation. Looks like you all want to get 1st place. Cyrus walked in front of Fairy Ibu, and deliberately stopped. He waited until Fairy Ibu's ribbon antennae violently trembled, and then he took another step forward. Then he put the silver medal on the Dilu Beast's neck, and loudly announced, 2nd place Dilu Beast. Pa pa pa. Thunderous applause instantly erupted from the audience. Although the Dilu Beast had fallen from 1st place last time to 2nd place this time, its score was still far in the lead. It could only be said that Fairy Ibu had done better. Therefore, when the results were confirmed, Fairy Ibu suddenly jumped up in joy. She glanced at the expressionless Dilu Beast, and the 2 ribbons formed a heart shape in the air. Then, without waiting for Ms. Cook to come forward to present the gold medal reward, it turned around and knocked the little monster away. It jumped off the podium and sprinted like a fierce tiger pouncing on its prey, crashing into Dark's arms. Dake promptly opened his arms and hugged her. Fairy Ibu laid her meaty cushion on his shoulder, and excitedly rubbed her soft face against his. Dake helplessly let her do as she pleased. Fairy Ibu's mood was transmitted to his soul through the ribbon on his hand, making him feel excited and happy. His sleepless efforts had finally paid off. Fairy Ibu finally surpassed the Diru Beast by just a few points, obtaining 1st place in this stage of the test. The magic elves' applause changed at this moment. The Dilu Beast turned its head, and its eyes firmly stared at Fairy Ibu's face, and suddenly narrowed. Meow. When the applause stopped, Miss Cook took the test paper and the gold medal and walked to Dake's side. Dake exchanged glances with her for a while, and then took the gold medal from her hand, and put it on Fairy Ibu's neck from back to front. Fairy Ibu felt the touch of the ribbon, and finally stopped rubbing, and raised her head a little. Dake looked at Fairy Ibu, whose eyes were red and moist, and pressed the gold medal on her chest, saying, Congratulations, you've successfully obtained first place. Meow. Fairy Ibu opened her arms and fiercely hugged Dake's face. At this point, the announcement of the results was over. The 3 magic elves that had obtained the medal and a large amount of red flowers were ordered to return to their seats. Dake walked up to the podium and gave a final summary of this test. I know that you all have different views on learning, and I won't force you to learn too profound knowledge, but learning the basics is very necessary. Especially the Vampire's Daughter and the Phoenix Girl. If you want to pass the Shungmalian Academy's entrance test, then please work hard in the following time. Otherwise, I can only give up on this idea. The Vampire's Daughter and the Phoenix Girl's faces suddenly froze. Dake glanced at them and didn't say anything else. He continued. The Shungmalian Academy's entrance test is usually half a month before the start of the school term, so you only have a month left. That's all. Finally, congratulations to Fairy Ibu, the Diru Beast, and the Little Devil for obtaining first place, second place, and third place respectively. In the middle of next month, before the Shungmalian Academy's entrance test, there will be a second test. I hope that more magic elves will be able to obtain excellent results in the second test. Next, I'll return the classroom to Teacher Cook. After saying this, Dake moved a little and waited until Madam Cook started to speak, and then he left the classroom. Through this test, he had a more detailed understanding of the magic elves' learning progress and mental state. And the magic elves also had a clearer understanding of their own level. They might be able to find their own goals, and thus obtain the motivation to move forward. Dake very much hoped that in the second test next month, the magic elves would be able to make great progress. Of course, he had to set an example and start working hard. After resting for 2 days, I almost lost my train of thought. Dake took out the materials for Mathematics 2 again and began to fill in the content according to the framework he had already drawn up. After about a quarter of an hour, he finally recovered his state, and the speed at which he wrote gradually quickened. A day quickly passed and dusk arrived. Dake let out a sigh of relief after being reminded by Olga, and temporarily put down the pen in his hand. With the framework in place, filling in the content was relatively simple. The content for Mathematics 2 was only at the junior high level, and the slightly more difficult content was related to Olympiad math. He originally planned to divide the junior high math content into 2 volumes, which would be compiled into Mathematics 2 and Mathematics 3, and then the senior high math content would be compiled into Mathematics 11 and Mathematics 11, and finally some advanced math content would be compiled into Mathematics 11. This way, it would be in line with the 6-year curriculum of the Shungmalian Academy. But after being reminded by Claire this morning, he realized that the 6th grade curriculum of the Shungmalian Academy mainly focused on practical teaching and wasn't suitable for advanced math content that was too deep. Therefore, he made adjustments. He planned to compile 80% of the junior high math content in Mathematics 2, 20% of the junior high math content and 60% of the senior high math content in Mathematics 3, and the remaining 40% of the senior high math content and some Olympiad math content in Mathematics 11. After that, he would divide the advanced math content into 2 volumes, which would be compiled into Mathematics 2 and Mathematics 11, and make Mathematics 11 and Mathematics 11 as electives. This way, students who didn't do well could continue to study Mathematics 3 and Mathematics 11 in the 5th and 6th grades. Students who had good grades and wanted to continue to study in depth could take Mathematics 3 and Mathematics 11 in the 5th and 6th grades respectively. That's reasonable. Dake patted his cheeks to get himself out of the ocean of math, and only then did he tidy up a little, and followed Olga to the dining hall. When he arrived, the magic elves were already prepared at their own table. The announcement of the results in the morning obviously affected some of the magic elves, and even during dinner time, there were still some magic elves holding notebooks in their hands. The young green-eyed dragon was also no longer like before, always grabbing the cutlery and staring at the door with Snorlax. The Vampire Daughter and Phoenix Girl seemed to have finally understood the importance of studying, and were still flipping through their books before dinner, when they encountered something they didn't understand. The Dilu Beast, who could speak human language, became the best person to ask for advice. As for the little demon beast in third place, and the lion beast in fourth place, they were snatched away by the other magic elves. I hope it's not a 3-minute popularity. Dake nodded with satisfaction, and then he started to discuss the content related to the national duel with Claire. As Panduola and the others took their seats, dinner finally began. When Dake was busy writing Mathematics 2, Aurora shouldered the responsibility of being the host, and brought Panduola and Hephaestus to the back of the mountain to play. When they talked about it during dinner, the dining hall was filled with laughter. Halfway through, Arvette, who had finished her work, came over late, and the dining hall became more lively. After dinner, Arvette pulled Hephaestus and Panduola to the living room, and Aurora returned to the bedroom to continue her study. Dake didn't continue to write Mathematics 2, but he brought the half-finished Easter reward, transformation spell, and entered Claire's room. "Have a seat." Claire asked him to sit down, and a monkey poured tea for both of them. Claire said, "Show me your transformation spell." "Okay." Dake responded, and then he took out the transformation spell and handed it over. After Claire received the transformation spell, she carefully observed it for a moment and said, "This is one of the prizes you received at the Easter Duel Festival?" Dake nodded and smiled. "Yes, a half-finished magic card." "It's not just a half-finished product." Claire observed the transformation spell and was a little surprised. "Is this the work of Professor Kazair?" Dake said yes. "No wonder." Claire couldn't help but sit up straight. Only Professor Kazair can modify the transformation spell to the point where it only needs to be written into the transformation spell. "It seems that I have nothing to teach you, so I'll teach you the method of writing the transformation spell." Dake nodded. This was his goal. Claire thought for a moment, took a piece of paper from the desk, wrote a few questions about the magic language, and pushed it over. "Let me see how far you've learned the magic language." Dake took the paper and looked at it carefully. Claire wrote down 5 questions ranging from easy to difficult. Dake only answered 2 of the questions before he had to put down his pen. This was because the last 3 questions were in a range that he hadn't touched at all. 2 questions. Claire glanced at the paper and looked at it carefully. 3 minutes later, she looked up and said, "You've mastered between the 2nd and 3rd grade? Who taught you the magic language?" Dake said, "Most of it was self-taught." "All right." Claire put away the paper and said, "The transformation spell doesn't require too much knowledge. Go back first today and come back tomorrow night." The next night, when Dake came to Claire's bedroom again, she had already sorted out the knowledge points needed to write the transformation spell. In other words, she didn't immediately teach him how to write the transformation spell. Instead, she started with further learning the magic language. From then on, Dake gave Claire all the time at night. After only 3 nights, he completely grasped the knowledge points needed to write the transformation spell. Then, Claire began to teach him the specific steps of writing the transformation spell. In the blink of an eye, it was July 21st, Saturday. Unknowingly, Panduola and Hephaestus had already spent 7 nights in the Duke's mansion. Although the people in the mansion didn't treat them as outsiders, they couldn't stay forever. As the effects of the Demon King execution ceremony gradually disappeared, the order of the imperial city gradually returned to normal. As for the Holy Church, because of the disappearance of the Demon King's corpse, they fell into another round of busyness. As a result, the pursuit of the escapees was greatly reduced. At this time, it was the best time to leave the imperial city. Therefore, after careful consideration, Panduola and Hephaestus decided to leave. Although life in the Duke's mansion was stable, it wasn't a long-term solution. Moreover, the imperial city was within the Holy Church's sphere of influence. Not only was it dangerous, but it could also easily bring unnecessary trouble to the Duke's mansion. There was still more than a month before school started. Panduola wanted to go to more places with his mother and see more beautiful sights. Therefore, the 2 of them told her about their decision to leave during breakfast. "Can't you stay for a few more days?" Yvette couldn't help but urge them to stay. These days, she and Hephaestus got along quite well. After going through the ordeal of being imprisoned, the lady transformed by the white dragon had obviously matured a lot. She was no longer as arrogant as she was when she was young. She also had some motherly qualities. After returning to the Duke's mansion every night, Yvette would talk to her about parenting. Although these two mothers, one only knew how to pamper her child, and the other had no experience in taking care of children, they chatted logically and were quite agreeable. Yvette didn't have many friends who could talk about this topic, so she was a little reluctant to let Hephaestus leave. On the other side, Aurora was also quite reluctant to let Senior Panduola leave. Because Deanna couldn't come to the Duke's mansion for the time being, she could only learn about armaments and magic-related knowledge by herself. If she encountered something she didn't understand, she couldn't ask anyone. Fortunately, Panduola's existence filled in this gap. These days, she spent most of her time with Panduola. It could be said that she learned a lot from this senior. There was no doubt that the two of them had built a friendship. On the other hand, Dake was busy writing mathematics too, and learning the transformation spell, so he didn't have much time to spend with her. When he suddenly heard that she was leaving the mansion, he realized that time had passed quickly. He didn't even bring her around the capital. Therefore, when Panduola and Hephaestus further expressed their intention to leave, he smiled and said, "Why don't we have a farewell party tonight and leave tomorrow?" With Yvette and Claire's agreement, Panduola and Hephaestus couldn't refuse and agreed to stay for another night. Dake continued, "Today is Saturday. I'll take you to the capital for a good walk." "I won't be going." Hephaestus shook her head slightly and smiled. "You young people can go and have fun together." Panduola playfully said, "What? Are you done with your work?" Dake couldn't help but look away. "It's the same if you do it tomorrow." Panduola agreed. Dake then said, "Since it's decided, there's no time to lose. Let's prepare and leave after dinner." Aurora. "Okay." A week had passed since the end of the Demon King's execution ceremony, and most of the outsiders had already left. The streets that had become abnormally lively due to the arrival of many outsiders now had a desolate feeling. Panduola and Aurora changed into outfits and followed Dake out of the Duke's mansion. Olga was already waiting outside. "Is it you today?" Dake walked over and smelled a familiar fragrance. Olga happily said, "Yes, young master. Katrina has something to do outside, so I'll accompany her today." "Sister Olga." Aurora walked over and greeted Olga. Olga nodded slightly and looked at Panduola. She smiled and said, "I've never formally introduced myself. I'm Olga, young master's personal maid. I'm very happy to be able to travel with you this time, Miss Doragon. Just call me Panduola." Panduola raised her hand and shook it, but a glimmer of light flashed in her eyes. After staying in the Duke's mansion for a few days, how could she not see Olga's status in the mansion? They were about the same age. And when they shook hands and looked at each other, although there was no hostility, there was a deeper meaning. When they let go of their hands, Dake had already pulled Aurora into the carriage. He poked his head out of the window and reminded them, "If you don't come now, we won't wait for you." "We'll be right there," Panduola replied and said to Olga, "Let's go." Then the two got into the carriage together. The Duke's carriage was spacious enough that it didn't feel crowded even when the four of them sat inside. On the small table in the middle of the carriage, there were small pieces of fruit. But this time, the fruit was beautifully arranged, and many of them were carved into the shape of small animals. So sweet." Dake ate a piece of fruit and praised. This was obviously Olga's work, so there was no harm in praising it. As expected, Olga smiled sweetly. Panduola blinked and said, "The inside of the carriage could be so comfortable. By the way, where are we going today?" Dake smiled and said, "Wherever you want to go." Panduola said, "Then let's go to the places you usually go." Dake's hand holding the fork paused for a moment, and he couldn't help but turn to look at Aurora. Aurora's face turned red, and she turned her head away in embarrassment. Dake said, "Then let's go to Blue Jade Street to look at the jade, then go to the dessert shop to see if there are any new products, then walk around Pet Street, and finally go to Star Building for lunch. In the afternoon, let's go to Soul and Dream." "Jade Shop, Dessert Shop and Pet Shop? That does sound like the places you would go." Panduola covered her mouth and chuckled. "But what are Star Building and Soul and Dream?" Dake explained, Star Building and Soul and Dream are entertainment places that nobles often go to. However, the former is a gathering place for most young people, while the latter is more upscale and more popular among middle-aged people. Last time, I saw a magic duel exhibition match at Soul and Dream. The guest contestant was a duelist named Butterfly Girl. I don't know if you've heard of her before? Butterfly Girl? Panduola thought carefully for a moment and said, I have some impression of her. In the past, I seem to have seen her in newspapers or magazines. She was a rather famous duelist. Dakum? Panduola asked. Why, are you not satisfied with her? Dake sighed slightly. I always felt that she was flashy but not practical. Panduola smiled slightly. Sometimes being flashy is also a duel strategy. To understand a duelist, you can't just analyze one or two matches. Especially when it was an exhibition match. 5-1 10,000 plus, 124 plus /233. The next chapter isn't finished yet. Asterisk. Chapter 5:16. Facing the summer breeze, the carriage sped along. Dake and his group first went to Blue Jade Street, strolled around jade shops, and played stone gambling for a while. Then they went to the sweet dessert shop, and sat down to eat some snacks. After that, they went around the Star Cluster building, strolled around the Pet Street, and returned to the Star Cluster building. Dake was much more relaxed when he came to the Star Cluster building again. Even when Panduola asked about the statue on the roof, he could still talk about it without any awkwardness. If it was me, it wouldn't be a statue that was cut in half. As senior sister Pandora spoke, she walked up the Star Cluster building with great interest. Perhaps because Dake's attitude was too amiable last time, the manager of the Star Cluster building actually mustered up the courage to come forward. However, Dake casually chatted with him and sent him away. As for the nobles who were gathered in the Star Cluster building to kill time today, they didn't scatter like rabbits that had seen a wolf like the last time. He was afraid that news of Dark Diamond's last visit to the Star Cluster building had already spread. These people probably already knew that he had changed from a hedonistic son who would beat people up and tear down their houses to a kind person who would turn hostility into chess. Marquis Middleton's youngest son, Joshua, had suffered a crushing defeat in a game of magic chess against him. This matter had probably become a joke in many people's leisure time. Website. https://m. VIP can't you? VIP of course. The Magus duel between him and Angus Jeffrey was more widely spread. After all, that was a better reflection of a person's strength. Angus Jeffrey's defeat was even more dramatic. Who would have thought that a fourth-year student would lose to a first-year student in an official Magus duel? Angus Jeffrey might have already become a laughingstock in some circles. Let's not talk about it. Dake brought Panduola, Aurora, and Olga up from the first floor of the Star Cluster building to the 6th floor. Unfortunately, he didn't meet Joshua this time. The group of people gathered on the 6th floor didn't have much interaction with him. Thus, he only ate lunch on the 6th floor of the Star Cluster building before leaving. According to the plan, we can go to the Eugenie Trade Circle first, and then go to the Haunting Soul Club. Dake pondered for a moment before instructing the Dragon Tamer guards to take a detour to Eugenie's trading circle. In this business circle full of rustic atmosphere, there was a noise and liveliness that the aristocratic city did not have. There were bards from afar, adventurers from all over the place, travelers who were dying in the capital, and residents who had taken root here. Countless people formed a huge flood. After Dake and the others got off at the intersection, they walked all the way to the Horseshoe Tavern. Along the way, there were some small incidents that made him smile even more. Walking together with the person you like, even if the road is boring, you can walk forever. What's more, the surrounding scenery was so bustling that it made people linger. When the owner of the Horseshoe Tavern saw the arrival of Dake and the others, he hurriedly came forward to greet them. However, Dake and the others only sat for a short while before getting back into the carriage. The sound of people galloping gradually faded away, and the surrounding environment returned to silence. Dake, Panduola, and Aurora chatted in the carriage about what they saw today and what they heard yesterday. From time to time, laughter would float out of the window and into the clouds. Not long after, the Duke's carriage drove into the lush garden, which was known as the royal courtyard. The lush garden was very green, and the lawn and flower beds could be seen everywhere, filling the air with the fragrance of flowers. Cute birds were singing in the trees, and groups of butterflies were dancing in the flower beds. The carriage gradually slowed down and slowly drove into the Haunting Soul Club in the lush garden. "Is this the high-class club you were talking about?" Panduola poked her head out of the carriage window and looked up at the old castle that was gradually coming into view. There was a faint curiosity in her heart. Dake nodded and said, "A place that requires a membership card to enter. But other than the interesting performances, everything else is just SOSO." Panduola could not help but roll her eyes. For the son of the Duke, how could it not be SOSO? In her opinion, even the star cluster building that she had walked past today was luxurious enough. The prices of those luxury goods often surprised her. She had been living in the academy ever since she left the Forest of Exile, and she had only left early during the holidays to exchange some credits for holy coins at Traveler Street. As the process of exchanging credits for holy coins was irreversible, she did not dare to be too extravagant. Although she had reunited with her mother, it was a pity that Hephaestus was even poorer than her. Of course, for a dragon species that was full of treasures, it was too easy to earn money. Seeing the Duke's carriage stop in the Guild Hall's garden, a female attendant quickly came to greet them. It was Miss Jessica, who had been in charge of entertaining Dake and the others last time. "Welcome, young Master Dimung. I am Jessica, and I will serve you wholeheartedly." Jessica had chestnut shoulder-length curly hair. Her facial features were exquisite, and her skin was fair. Her exquisite makeup gave her a faint intellectual beauty. She wore a more neutral outfit, and only the collar was slightly open, revealing an attractive abyss. Dake nodded at her and got down from the carriage after Olga. He then extended his hand and helped Aurora and Panduola down from the carriage. Jessica observed the two ladies who had come with the young master of the Dimming family, and her gaze lingered on Panduola for a while. Obviously, she had figured out who the main guests were this time. After 3 in the afternoon, the number of people in Haunted by Dreams gradually increased. The carriages drove into the garden, and the men and women who walked out of the carriages were either rich or respectable. Every one of them exuded a luxurious aura. Panduola walked beside Dake and blended in perfectly with the environment. Halfway through, she hooked her arm around Dake's. Aurora, who was walking on the other side of Dake, looked more and more like their younger sister. Aurora clenched her fingers and felt a little uneasy. Olga, on the other hand, was a little slower. She walked behind them and squinted her eyes at the backs of the two ladies. As Angus Jeffrey's jokes gradually spread, Dake Diming's reputation had changed slightly. Along the way, there were many nobles who took the initiative to greet them. So much so that it was annoying. Dake seemed to be calmly dealing with those people, but he could not help but quicken his pace. Other than that, the goods and services in Haunted by Dreams were very attractive. Even Panduola could not help but take a fancy to a piece of jewelry. It was a silver necklace with a cat pendant, and it was worth a lot. However, Dake's VIP membership card was the highest level. Not only did it not have any restrictions, but it also had a free quota of 1 million holy coins per month. It was more than enough to buy a necklace. Of course, he would not favor one over the other. He also chose one for Aurora and Olga. It was not until 5 in the afternoon that the 4 of them arrived at the center of Haunted by Dreams. Dake was already familiar with the circular corridor built around the arena. He led the way to the inside of the corridor and asked, "What's the performance tonight?" Jessica revealed a professional smile and said, "It's 5 now. There should be a shield-bashing performance in the arena, followed by a swordsmanship performance, a piano performance, and a beast tamer performance." A shield-bashing performance and a beast tamer performance? Dake was curious. Jessica explained, a shield-bashing performance, simply put, is a clash between 2 warriors with shields. The winner will be the one who rushes the other out of the predetermined range. "What about the beast tamer performance?" Dake asked. Jessica smiled and said, "It should be considered a high-level performance of the circus. Now that magicians are flourishing, beast tamers have already retired from the stage of history. It's not easy to find a real beast tamer." "I see." Dake nodded slightly, and had some understanding of these two performances. The shield-bashing performance was similar to sumo wrestling, but the warriors in the performance had to hold a heavy shield and gather all their strength to clash. It required a lot of strength and endurance from the warriors on both sides. Every time they collided, the sound of explosions would set off a wave of excitement among the audience. If this was a competition, it should be an extremely hot-blooded competition. As for the Beast Tamer performance, it would probably allow the audience to experience the aura of a real beast, different from that of a magic fairy. But halfway through, Dake suddenly paused and asked doubtfully, "Are you sure it's time for the shield-bashing performance?" Jessica couldn't help but look at the edge of the corridor. There were indeed many guests gathered at the edge of the corridor, but the sound of shields clashing that should have been there didn't sound. If one listened carefully, what entered their ears was the sound of human voices and bird cries. Could it be that the Beast Tamer went on stage early? Jessica hesitated and said calmly, "Perhaps the order of the performance has been adjusted. This is not rare in the arena. Anyway, we'll know when we go and take a look." Dark's interest was piqued when he sensed the mana fluctuations coming from the arena. He quickened his pace to the edge of the corridor, and looked down while holding the railing. He saw that there were two magisters dueling in the arena. A magister's duel? Pandora leaned close to him and looked down. She couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth. Although it had been a pleasant day, the magister's duel was still more attractive to her. "Is this also an exhibition match?" "I don't think so." Dake pointed at one of the duelists and said, "Haunted by Dreams can't afford such a duelist." "Well, let me think." Panduola frowned slightly and thought for a moment. "The one down there is the president of the Aristocratic History Research Society, right? I've seen him before." Dake said, "Yes, it's Angus Jeffrey. I wonder why he's dueling. Was it because he got PTSD last time?" Panduola. Dake shook his head. "Nothing. I mean, maybe he's obsessed with duels?" Panduola couldn't help but smile. "I don't think so." The two then focused their attention on the arena below. Although Angus Jeffrey's frigid winter earth had been successfully dispelled, the temperature in the arena had dropped, and it would be difficult to recover in a short period of time. His opponent was dressed in a suit and had ample space in his movements. But this was just a facade. Even if the duelists trained by Haunted by Dreams were lacking in strength, they had to look good and not lose their composure at any time. This was the professional training of an actor. But from above, the duelist's face, which was covered by the brim of his hat, was distorted. In this cold environment, he was sweating all over and his eyes were narrowed. It was obvious that something was wrong. On the other hand, Angus Jeffrey was looking down on him with arrogance and indifference, as if he was looking down on an ant. Although he probably thought so in the past, he would never show it in front of the public like now. But at this moment, Angus Jeffrey did not hide his arrogance at all. The domineering aura between his brows almost seeped through his skin. The arena was filled with a strange aura that was hard to detect. "In the name of Angus Jeffrey, I sacrifice to summon the Frost Emperor." Angus Jeffrey suddenly raised the magic card in his hand high up in the sky. A crystal-like, icy blue radiance was released from the card. Needless to say, the two magic guide spirits in the field turned into light and became sacrifices to summon a higher-level magic guide spirit. An emperor penguin the size of a small mountain rose from the sacrificial summoning circle. The ice crystal crown on its head almost reached the top of the corridor. The nobles in the circular corridor couldn't help but shout in excitement. All of their gazes were focused on the Frost Emperor. This fat penguin, which hadn't been summoned during the duel with Dark, let out an ear-piercing shriek when it appeared. Then it abruptly raised its stubby lower limbs and used its thick feet to viciously stomp on the opposing magic guiding fairy. That pitiful magic spirit was stomped to death, and the light of magic scattered in all directions. The Frost Emperor swayed its body and walked to the center of the arena step by step. Its huge body gradually covered the duelist trained by the arena in its shadow. An indescribable fear rose from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and look up at the Frost Emperor's eyes. Suddenly, he screamed and fled the arena before the life enchantment of the Magitech ball was broken. Boom! The Frost Emperor didn't stop, and it stomped on the life barrier of the magic conducting ball. Beep. The referee suddenly blew his whistle and announced Angus Jeffrey's victory. Intense applause sounded, and the atmosphere in the arena was unimaginably heated. Angus Jeffrey withdrew his enchanted fairy after his victory, leaving behind only a cold assertion before he turned around abruptly. Trash. Dake observed carefully from the corridor and was shocked. Is this still that senior Jeffrey? In just a week, Angus Jeffrey had changed so much that it was shocking. Hey Dake. The sudden greeting made Dake come back to his senses. He turned around and looked in the direction of the voice. Phyllis Rahman was waving at him. Beside her were Brown Eugenie and several other nobles whom he was more familiar with. Dake rolled his eyes and called Panduola and Aurora to walk toward Phyllis. Phyllis saw him walk over and hurriedly made room for him. The two nobles laughed and got up. They went to the sofa where Phyllis and the others were sitting and put them on the back of the chair. It was quite easy. Dake came to the sofa and asked Panduola and Aurora to sit down. He then sat down and made room for Olga. As a maid, Olga was supposed to stand by the side. But under Dake's signal, she could only sit down. The maid beside her quickly poured tea. Phyllis raised his hand and said enthusiastically, "Why are you free to come to the club today?" Dake nodded and said, "I've been busy for a week and wanted to relax." "You're not with Jeffrey?" "Jeffrey," Phyllis moved the lid of the cup and said meaningfully, "we haven't been together since last time." Dake had a thought and asked, "What happened?" Phyllis smiled and said, "How should I put it? Probably because he was too embarrassed to go out after losing to you. Of course, it's also possible that his father grounded him. Anyway, before this week, we didn't see him at all." "Before this week?" Dake asked. "That means he's been active again since this week." "Yes." Phyllis sighed. "He's not just ordinarily active. If I hadn't known him since I was young, I would have thought that he was a different person." Dake said he's become. More like a noble? Phyllis was stunned at first. Then he carefully tasted it and finally understood. That's what happened. He's become like an old noble from a few generations ago. Do you know how it feels to look at someone with your nose? It's like that. And his legs are short. No, I'm just saying that he's not tall. So if you want to look at someone with your nose, you need to do something else like. Dake. Like what? Phyllis raised his finger and said seriously, tools or geographical advantage. Dake. High heels or standing on high ground. Phyllis couldn't help but smile and said, "Don't say that in front of him. He's actually quite fragile." Dake. A heart of glass? Phyllis's eyes lit up and he said, Yes, that's the feeling. Linking glass and heart together, it's surprisingly easy to say." Dake asked curiously, "Then how did he become like this?" Phyllis leaned back in his chair and said, "Who knows? Anyway, on Monday, he suddenly appeared in the hall, and then challenged the duelists trained by the hall from time to time. No matter who he talked to, he was very aggressive. But some people seemed to like that feeling very much, and some people thought that he suddenly came to his senses, and had more value to rely on. Look." Dark followed Phyllis's direction, and saw Angus Jeffrey walking up from the entrance. He was surrounded by even more fans than the last time he saw Angus Jeffrey. It was clear that after his personality changed, there were more and more people who thought highly of him. People prefer to follow a tiger, not a poisonous snake. Phyllis's voice drifted out. Dake looked away and said, "Then do you think this is normal or abnormal?" "Normal or abnormal?" Phyllis was slightly surprised. "What did you see?" But Dake just shook his head and said, "I don't know." He didn't know much about Angus Jeffrey, nor did he have the interest to know. It was just that when he saw the magic duel just now, he faintly felt a trace of dissonance. But he didn't know what exactly the dissonance was. He looked at Panduola beside him and asked, "Senior, what do you think?" Phyllis then noticed that the girl beside him had a breathtaking aura, and hurriedly said, "This is also a top student of the Shungmalian Academy?" Panduola looked at the girl in front of her, who seemed to have walked out of a storybook, and nodded. "I am in the same year as Angus Jeffrey. Is that so?" Phyllis carefully looked at Panduola, and felt that this girl, who was close to her age, looked very familiar. Although she wasn't keen on watching magic duels, the Academy had always been very active in promoting celebrity duelists. Perhaps she had seen Panduola's picture from a female magazine. Panduola didn't continue looking at her, and instead said to Dake, "Angus Jeffrey's behavior just now was very different from when he was in the Academy, but I don't know much about him. Maybe it's just his hidden nature?" Dake looked at Phyllis and asked, "Is that so?" Phyllis pondered for a moment and said, "It's not his true nature, but he does like to disguise himself." "All right." Dake suddenly felt a little disappointed, and said, "Maybe he was enlightened after being lectured by Count Jeffrey. No matter what, it has nothing to do with us. Phyllis, do you want to have dinner with us next?" "Right here?" Phyllis asked. Dark smiled and said, "Let's do it here. I also want to see a shield bashing performance or a beast tamer performance." Most of the nobles hanging out with Phyllis didn't have a political stance. Those with emotional intelligence wouldn't talk about things that dampened the mood here. They picked the more popular topics recently, such as the Demon King execution ceremony that had already passed, or some interesting things that happened during the Demon King execution ceremony, and chatted casually. Everyone present was young, and the topics they focused on were always similar, so it was quite fun. However, after a few exchanges of pleasantries, Dake prepared to change the venue. Aurora and Panduola obviously didn't like chatting with so many people, so of course he couldn't continue. However, just as he was about to raise the topic, he suddenly noticed Angus Jeffrey walking over. Upon closer inspection, Angus Jeffrey's temperament had indeed changed. He seemed to have not taken care of his hair for a while, and his brown-blonde hair was dragged behind his head, with only a small ponytail made with a thin string. His facial features were still regular, but there were some dark circles under his eyes, as if he didn't have enough sleep. However, due to his overall temperament, no one noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Angus Jeffrey's eyebrows were cold, and his chin was slightly raised. His gaze was slanted downwards, full of arrogance and indifference. However, when he saw Dake Dimung, the coldness instantly disappeared, and his eyes revealed undisguised hatred. Just by looking at each other, Dake knew that the other party didn't come with good intentions. If the previous duel invitation could be said to have maintained a semblance of calm, this time, Angus Jeffrey was no longer trying to hide his intentions. Panduola felt Jeffrey's malice, and leaned close to Dake's ear whispering, "Does Jeffrey have a grudge against you?" Dake thought for a moment and whispered, "It should be a matter of political stance. I don't have any grudges against him personally." "Yes, it should be like that." Panduola couldn't help but laugh. "It doesn't look like it to me." Dake shrugged. "At least I don't have a grudge against him." Panduola. "Then he has a grudge against you." Dake, "Who knows?" Phyllis saw them whispering and couldn't help but turn around, and saw Angus Jeffrey walking over. She rolled her eyes and smiled. "Angus, why are you here?" "I came to see, what are you guys talking about?" Angus Jeffrey's voice was a little low. After he walked over, he directly pressed his hand on someone's shoulder, and that person hurriedly stood up to give up his seat. Angus Jeffrey sat down expressionlessly, crossed his arms, and swept his gaze over Dake. When he saw Panduola, his pupils constricted, and the hatred in his eyes receded. Even his tone became gentler. "Dake Dimung, do you dare to have another round?" For a moment, the atmosphere was as cold as winter, and the temperature dropped rapidly. Phyllis sighed slightly, not quite understanding Angus Jeffrey's actions. Provoking the son of a duke was an irrational act. If it was in a place like the Academy where one's status wasn't important, then so be it. But in this hall full of nobles, Angus Jeffrey really shouldn't have challenged Dake Dimung a second time. Even if he won, what good would it do him? Just to let people know that he had the ability to win against a first-year student? Considering that Jeffrey's condition was really not right, Phyllis didn't even have the desire to watch the show this time. Although she and Jeffrey had known each other since they were young, their relationship wasn't that good. She wanted to persuade him, but there was no one to do so. And looking at Jeffrey's appearance, it was obvious that she couldn't persuade him. Thus, she could only show a helpless expression. Even she felt that there was no way, and a small character like Brown Eugenie naturally couldn't participate. On the other side of the sofa, Dake couldn't help but narrow his eyes, and carefully sized up Angus Jeffrey again. As he got closer, the strange aura on Angus Jeffrey's body became more obvious, but it was just a hazy feeling. That feeling made him feel a little uncomfortable, but he also wanted to explore it. He turned his head slightly, and whispered to Panduola, "Can you feel it?" Panduola narrowed his eyes for a long time, but still shook his head. The two of them completely ignored Angus Jeffrey during their conversation. Jeffrey immediately raised his eyebrows and said in a low voice, "What, you don't dare?" Dake raised his head slightly helplessly and said, "Senior Jeffrey, have you forgotten even the most basic etiquette?" Jeffrey's expression froze, but he still said firmly, "What, you want me to prepare a white glove?" Dake, forget it, come on." Seeing that Dake had agreed, Jeffrey's lips curled up, and he sneered, "Don't blame me for being a bully. I'll give you 15 minutes to prepare. After 15 minutes, I'll let you know who is the final winner." Before he finished speaking, he suddenly stood up, turned around, and returned to his own territory. The group of lesser nobles who came with him also left with him. The atmosphere here instantly turned for the better. Phyllis immediately said, "Dake, you can just agree like that, right? Although I don't know much about magic duels, Angus hasn't lost in the past few days. He must have improved greatly." Dake shook his head and said, "Winning and losing is normal. I want to use this duel to investigate him. I want to know why he's so obsessed with duels." Panduola said with concern, "Will it be okay? Jeffrey is a fourth-year student after all." Aurora also frowned and said, "Dake, it's better to be careful. I keep feeling that there's something wrong with that person." Dake smiled and said, "There's only a challenge when there's difficulty. Isn't the fun of duels to find the possibility from the impossible?" He then knocked on the card bag, injected magic power, and reminded the magic elves to prepare. 3 minutes later, he called back the magic elves one by one. For a magus, as long as they had a magic card in hand, even if they were thousands of miles away from the magic elves, they could call them back in an instant. And today just so happened to be the weekend. The magic elves were roaming freely in the sea of homework. They wouldn't delay the normal teaching. The only problem was that Paradise and Zoo were still in the room, so compared to 2 weeks ago, there was one less core card in today's deck. But the gap brought by Zoo was made up by Snorlax. So it wasn't a big problem. Dake used the remaining 10 minutes to communicate with the magic elves and replenish his magic. The news that Dake Dimming and Angus Jeffrey were about to have a second magic duel in this hall spread like the wind. 15 minutes was enough for all the guests in the castle to come to the center of the hall. Most of the people here used the result of the duel 2 weeks ago as a joke, so they were very interested in the result of this second magic duel. Unknowingly, the circular corridor was full of noble men and women. But compared to 2 weeks ago, no one dared to look down on the son of the Valkyrie. But Angus Jeffrey's winning streak in the past few days in the hall obviously played a role. There were many people who were optimistic that he would succeed in his revenge. Yes, revenge. No matter how you looked at it, this magic duel was the most popular revenge drama for the masses. The fourth-year student who had suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of the first-year student, after going through a lot of training, had shouted, "Life is full of ups and downs, don't look down on a poor youth." Finally, after putting in a lot of effort, he had successfully defeated the first-year student. Wait, why does it sound like something is wrong? Forget it, forget it. In short, there were many people who wanted to see Angus Jeffrey succeed, but there were also many people who wanted to see him defeated by the first-year student again. If it wasn't for the sensitive identity of the two duels, the management of the hall would have opened the door. But even if the door wasn't opened, the men and women present were in high spirits, full of anticipation for this duel. Feeling the mood of the audience, Dake Dimming certainly wouldn't be disappointed. After he was ready, he stood up from his seat and prepared to walk to the protruding platform. At the same time, a maid hurried over and said to him, "Mr. Dimming, Mr. Jeffrey has proposed a duel in the arena below. May I ask if it is possible?" Dark furrowed his brows, feeling a little wary of Jeffrey's sudden suggestion. However, after careful consideration, he still nodded at the female attendant and said, "No problem." The maid quickly said, "I will go and inform Mr. Jeffrey. If you are not familiar with the route, you can let Jessica lead the way." After saying that, she hurriedly left. Dake paused for a moment, then raised his hand to Panduola and the other two and said, "Then I will go down. I will go with the young master." Olga stood up. Dake's heart skipped a beat, then he nodded and said, "Okay, then I will leave Aurora in your care." Panduola smiled and said, "No problem." Dake smiled at them, then turned to Jessica and said, "Please lead the way." With Jessica leading the way, Dake and Olga quickly entered the corridor that led to the arena. Olga only then said softly, "Young master, if you feel anything strange, please immediately stop the duel." Dake nodded and said, "I will." The corridor was very quiet, and the sound of footsteps gradually descended. Soon, when the hubbub of voices could be heard again, the light of the arena came into view. Dake Dimming walked out of the corridor, followed by a beautiful maid and a proper maid. He raised his head slightly and saw Angus Jeffrey's figure appear at the entrance of the road directly opposite him. There was no one following Jeffrey. After he walked out of the corridor, he looked at Dake and smiled silently. Then the tiles on both sides suddenly moved away, and the contestant platforms gradually rose. This arena often held exhibition matches for magician duels, so it had all the necessary facilities. When the contestant platforms were completely raised, a circular plate in the summoning area of the arena dropped down, and a magic conducting ball drilled out of a circular hole, quietly floating half a meter in the air. Then the circular plate rose again and filled the hole. Then a platform 5 meters high popped out from the side wall. A referee in a red suit and a female commentator in a blue suit walked up to the platform at the same time. Compared to the duel 2 weeks ago, the duel this time was clearly more formal. Is this why they came down to the arena? Dark pondered for a moment, then ignored Angus Jeffrey's provocation, and walked up to the red team's platform. As for Angus Jeffrey, he walked up to the blue side's platform. Both contestants activated the card tables on the platforms at the same time, and a magic conducting projection appeared, along with a loudspeaker. Angus Jeffrey suddenly looked at Dake and said, "Dimung." "Yes." Dake casually replied and put the cards into the card slots on the table. Before the 30-second countdown of the preparation phase began, both contestants had plenty of time to communicate. However, most people would not use this time to their advantage. Relying on one's own strength and luck, and not trash talk and other offstage tactics to win, was the way most duelists were reserved. However, Angus Jeffrey clearly had a lot of things he needed to vent. As a benevolent, righteous, courteous, kind, respectful, and thrifty junior, Dake naturally did not mind him revealing more during the conversation. It was best to say all the things that should be said and should not be said. Angus Jeffrey saw that he was not nervous at all, and the coldness in his eyes grew colder. He lowered his voice and said, "Do you think this duel is easy?" Dake did not expect Jeffrey to suddenly say such a thing, so he asked, "Why do you think so?" Angus Jeffrey suddenly raised his voice and said, "Because you have never lost." Dake shook his head calmly and said, "No, I have lost." "Impossible." Angus Jeffrey immediately denied. "I have been paying attention to you since you joined the duel club. Whether it was the second-year Elsie Kevin, or the third-year Michael Owen, Stuart Phone, or Tom Nixon, none of them could stop you. You have never experienced the feeling of losing, so how would you know the difficulty of a duel?" There was also a fourth-year student called Angus Jeffrey. Dake silently rolled his eyes. If the scope of duel was defined as magic conducting duel, he had indeed never lost. However, what was the necessary connection between never losing and think this duel is easy? Although Angus Jeffrey's expression was still normal, Dake could faintly hear a trace of hysteria in his forced logic. He thought for a moment, and simply agreed. "Senior Jeffrey, if it is only limited to magic conducting duels, I have indeed never lost. However, isn't a magic conducting duel supposed to be a relaxing and joyful event that brings smiles to everyone? Why are you so hung up on its difficulty?" Angus Jeffrey suddenly raised his head and said proudly, "Because a duel is a serious, solemn, and noble event. Its difficulty its importance, its competitiveness, all of these are its charm. People like you who do not even know the difficulty of a duel do not deserve to win. Dake was even more confused. He immediately asked, Senior Geoffrey, is a duel so important to you? Angus Geoffrey sneered. Of course it is important. Duels are my life, my future, and I was born for duels. Anyone who does not respect a duel will pay the price. Including you, Dake Dimong. Then he suddenly placed the deck in his hand into the card slot. Following the sound of shuffling cards, he raised his chin again and said angrily, Dake Dimong, do you accept my challenge? Dake. Yes, I accept. Thus, in an instant, a gray flame suddenly ignited on Angus Geoffrey's forehead. The flame soared into the sky, and then suddenly elongated into a gray line. In the blink of an eye, it had circled the arena, causing the gray flame to ignite at the edge of the arena. A strange aura instantly filled the air. Dake's eyes opened wide. He clearly saw the gray flame, and a sense of familiarity rose in his heart. Then, he looked around and immediately confirmed that apart from the two dueling parties, no one else could see the gray flame. 5 in 110,000 plus, 127/233, brothers, don't waste the guaranteed monthly votes in Blades, 3. Chapter 517. In the circular corridor, Panduola placed her hands on the railing and looked down at the arena coldly. Aurora and Felix were by her side. The two of them were also looking down, turning a blind eye to the burning gray flames. Instead, it was the conversation between Dake and Angus Geoffrey that made them suspicious. The rest of the audience were the same. Angus Geoffrey's words were too exaggerated. Duels are my life, and I was born for duels, didn't sound like something he would say. Some people even blurted out that there was something wrong with Angus Geoffrey's brain. Of course, some people were more concerned about Dake Dimong's undefeated record. The names that came out of Angus Geoffrey's mouth were not unknown people. Those who liked to watch the matches in the Shung Malian Academy's duel hall would more or less know these names. Although they were all second and third year students, the best of each year had the ability to fight above their level. Just like Dake Dimong in front of them, his strength couldn't be measured by his age. Remember the URL, VIP can't you? 6. However, Dark Diamond's battle record was indeed a little too exaggerated. One had to know that he had just graduated from first year. Those noble men and women wouldn't forget that Angus Geoffrey had also lost to him. Of course, this was Angus Geoffrey's battle to take revenge. Although Angus Geoffrey's words were a little confusing, his confidence were revealed. Therefore, there were a few more people who thought highly of him. Of course, this was only before the duel began. Once the duel began and both sides showed signs of victory, then they would change their minds at any time. After Dake confirmed that no one else could see the flames, he decisively did something. He immediately shouted, Olga, do it! In his hearing, this loud shout resounded through the venue through the loudspeaker. However, whether it was the audience above or Olga below, no one had any reaction. After seeing this, Angus Geoffrey sneered, Don't waste your energy. Within my dual domain, no one will be able to detect your abnormality. Dake's heart sank. He immediately realized the additional effect of the gray flames. Within the range of the gray flames, any words or actions that wanted to reveal information about the gray flames would be changed, making it impossible for others to detect the abnormality. This wasn't the first time Angus Geoffrey had used this dual domain. The previous duelist trained by the hall was obviously one of the victims. Looking at the way that person fled in fear, he probably lost all memories of the gray flames after the duel. It was even possible that he lost more than just his memories. Angus Geoffrey's dual domain was extremely similar to the Dark Duel, in Dark Diamond's impression. I wonder how fair this dual domain is. Will it be like the Dark Duel, with a clear bias? Dake's brain was spinning rapidly. After only half a minute, he immediately made his next move. He tried to walk down the stage. However, when he reached the edge of the stairs, the gray flame suddenly jumped up, as if wanting to burn him to ashes. Dake subconsciously retracted his foot, and saw the gray flame shrink back. Angus Geoffrey crossed his arms and looked at Dake's actions. He sneered again. It seems that when faced with the fear of the unknown, you are no different from ordinary people. Dake's mouth twitched. He turned back to the card table and smiled. I am an ordinary person. Let me guess, you obtained this ability after last weekend, right? Angus Jeffrey's eyebrows twitched. He subconsciously gritted his teeth, but he quickly concealed it. You think I will reveal information to you? I will not divulge anything related to the dual domain to you, including its rules. Dake Dimming, carry the fear of the unknown with you and feel the pain of defeat. Dake raised his head slightly, and found that the referee and commentator on the platform had no reaction to what he had said. He immediately confirmed the effectiveness of the gray flames. As for the rules within the dual domain, since it was a duel, no matter what the rules were, they couldn't escape the 8 words. The winner is the king, the loser is the bandit. As long as he won, so what if he didn't know the rules? Moreover, the dual domain defined by the gray flames might not necessarily be unbreakable. His fingertips touched the magic card in the card slot, thinking quickly in his mind. Angus Jeffrey's sudden change in timing, his inexplicable strong obsession with the dual domain, the strange logic that forced it all together, and the strange feeling brought about by the gray flames. The signs were already very obvious. Did something leak out from the underworld and attach itself to his body? Dake quickly calmed down as he pondered. Just as Angus Jeffrey had said, the unknown could indeed bring fear. But he wasn't completely ignorant. He collected information, carried out inference, and finally got the answer. He was sure that what he knew was much more than what Angus Jeffrey had imagined. That would explain why the gray flames, which didn't have strong energy fluctuations, could obscure the perception of everyone, including Panduola and Olga. Because it was something from the underworld. The underworld and the present world. The dead and the living. There was an insurmountable wall between the two. After the twilight of the gods. Before the real death, the living would never be able to understand the world of the dead. Even with the heritage of the Holy Church, the underworld was ominous. Only a very small number of races knew about the underworld. Among these very small number of races, the Devil Clan was the majority. The lack of knowledge was the biggest reason why the human perception couldn't break through the gray flames. In this dual domain, if I lose the duel, I will lose some things, including part of my memory. What if I win the duel? Dake's thinking was broad enough that he quickly thought of this. Then he suddenly became interested in the dark duel, in the dual domain. No rush. Dake's eyes were surging with excitement. This dual domain was similar to a ritual. The loser would pay the price, and the winner would naturally get the benefits. Angus Jeffrey saw Dake's expression change from confusion to excitement with his own eyes, and his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He quickly realized that Dake Dimming was different from the other duelists he had defeated in the past few days. The gray flame on his forehead flickered slightly under the agitation of various emotions. On the platform, the commentator, who knew nothing about the real exchange between the two contestants, was already giving a simple introduction to the two contestants. This female commentator, who was specially trained by the club, was wearing a dark blue suit, but the collar was wide open, completely exposing her deep cleavage. Her eyebrows were picturesque, her nose was high, her lips were red, and her chestnut-colored hair was straight to her waist. The tailored suit on her perfectly accentuated the curves of her body, making her look even more sensual. I'm sure everyone here has a good understanding of the two contestants, so without further ado, let's turn the focus to the duel itself. Let's see which contestant will dominate the duel and obtain the final victory. Let the match begin. Beep. The referee followed the commentator's announcement and blew the whistle. The dual domain, which was completely different from the dual domain, had officially begun. Preparation stage. 30s, a projection of a 30-second countdown suddenly appeared above the arena. Dake didn't overthink the start of the duel, because he was overthinking. He said as he drew his card, "Senior Jeffrey, I really want to know what the loser has to pay. Can you tell me? I hope you can still laugh when the time comes." Jeffrey snorted and drew his card. From the gray flame on his forehead, a cold aura constantly flowed into his mind, allowing him to remain calm at all times. In this state, his thoughts wouldn't be hindered by his emotions, and he could do as he wished, giving him an unyielding will. Even if the magic sphere's life enchantment only had 1 mana left, he could still calmly launch the fiercest counterattack. Both contestants drew their cards almost at the same time. After Dake drew his 5 cards, he immediately fanned them out and looked at them quickly. Kettle Kettle, Lightbringer, Dream Demon, Bliss 3, Moon Change, Curse Cage, Little Devil Magical Beast, Kettle Kettle. Dake's eyes flashed, and he immediately drew Kettle Kettle. After the last duel, he had a general understanding of Angus Jeffrey's deck. As a top student in the 4th grade, Angus Jeffrey had a large number of chains that allowed him to quickly recruit high-star magic elves. Last time, Dake's strong luck played a large part in suppressing Angus Jeffrey. If he didn't find a strong enough magic elven card in the early stages, he might not have been able to block the 5-star magic elven monster's attack in the first wave. But this time, with Kettle Kettle in his hand, nothing would be a problem. At the critical moment, he could use Bliss 3, Moon Change, to induce the Dream Demon or the Little Devil Magical Beast to evolve to deal with the crisis. When the Little Devil Magical Beast evolved into a Heidi Road beast with 2 hands and 2 legs, the Lightbringer would be useful. Therefore, the 5 magic elven cards he drew were not bad. But when he was ready, he suddenly heard Angus Jeffrey's maniacal laughter. Angus Jeffrey, whose forehead was burning with gray fire, released his malice without any scruples. He glared fiercely at Dake, and from the 5 cards in his hand, he suddenly drew one of them and sneered. It seems that the goddess of fate is not on your side. What awaits you will be the evil spirit on the road to the underworld. As soon as he finished speaking, the 30-second countdown of the preparation phase had ended. Tick. The countdown for the first round of the battle phase began instantly. The moment both contestants heard the sound, they immediately cast their usual summoning spells. In the name of Dake Dimmung, Magic Elven Summoning. In the name of Angus Jeffrey, Magic Elven Summoning. Without a doubt. At the beginning of the first round, both contestants chose to summon their first-tier Magic Elven Summoning. Angus Jeffrey did not use the same tactic as last time, which was to summon Frigid Earth. As the 2 summoning lights fell into the red and blue summoning zones, the Magic Elven Summoning appeared at the same time. The one that appeared in the red summoning zone was a Magic Elven Summoning that looked like a tortoise. Only those who were more knowledgeable could see that it was not a tortoise, but a worm. Bash. Amidst the solemn chirping, Master Kettle poked its yellow head out of the hole in its red hard shell. And then its 4 soft tentacle-like limbs came out. A quarter of an hour ago, it was still struggling with its homework in its room, but now it was standing in the middle of the duel. As Dake Diamond's usual starter, Kettle's ability and mentality were unquestionable, and it was enough to be entrusted with Dake's trust. But the one that appeared in the blue summoning zone was a Magic Elven Summoning that looked like a small coffin. The Magic Elven Summoning was made of sparkling and translucent ice, and it emitted a white mist condensed from cold air. It was as if something was struggling to come out from within, trembling from time to time. It's the Netherworld Ice Coffin. The commentator on the platform suddenly shouted. In the past few days of duels, contestant Angus Jeffrey has shown us the wonders of this Magic Elven Summoning many times. Its sure kill skill, the Netherworld Path, can summon the wandering spirits of the Netherworld Death Path. The audience, who had some understanding of the Netherworld Ice Coffin, couldn't help but show a trace of pity. It was no secret that Angus Jeffrey was able to use the Netherworld Ice Coffin as a springboard to summon the 7-star Magic Elven Summoning Frost Lich from the deck. As a 4th-year student of the Shung Malian Academy, Angus Jeffrey's ability had already been revealed. At this moment, even if a student of a higher year were to stand in front of Angus Jeffrey, it would be extremely difficult to find a way to break through, not to mention a mere first-year student. Even Panduola couldn't help but feel worried for Dake. Although the Kettle Kettle was an extremely powerful Magic Elven Summoning card, it actually didn't have the ability to deal with the sure kill skill of the Magic Elven Summoning card. If it were to forcefully rely on its defense, it would most likely not be able to withstand the Frost Lich's long-range attack. On the red team's platform, Dake Dimming didn't seem to be the slightest bit flustered. With his previous experience, he clearly knew that it would take at least 10 seconds for the Frost Lich to break out of the Underworld Ice Coffin. And these 10 seconds were enough for him to summon again. In the name of Dake Dimmung Magic Elven Summoning, come out Dream Demon. In less than 7 seconds after the Netherworld Ice Coffin was summoned, Dake had already successfully summoned the Dream Demon. Little Mimi, the dark green, ghost-like little cutie directly appeared in mid-air. It curiously observed its surroundings and spun around in the air, looking innocent and cute. Of course, if anyone was deceived by its harmless appearance, they would most likely have nightmares at night. Dream Demon hide. Taking advantage of the cooldown time of the summoning, Dake lightly said. The little Dream Demon immediately went into the kettle's hole and merged with it. After summoning the Netherworld Ice Coffin, Angus Jeffrey didn't stop there. He also used a normal summoning spell for the second time. In the blue team's summoning area, a small snow white bear like a doll was slowly crawling up. Sleeved white bear hidden snow. Although it was a 3-star magic elven summoning card, the sleeved white bear only existed as a sacrifice in Jeffrey's deck. Its sure kill skill, hidden snow, could make it invisible. As the snowflakes fell, the sleeved white bear's figure quickly disappeared. This was a backup plan that Angus Jeffrey had buried just in case. Then 3 seconds later, the 10-second countdown above the Netherworld Ice Coffin completely reached 0. In that instant, the ice coffin cover suddenly shattered from the inside out. An ear-piercing scream pierced through the sky. Extremely cold air exploded from the ice coffin. The cold air was so fierce that it even caused the temperature in the area to plummet. The elegant Frost Lich sat up straight in the underworld ice coffin. It was tall and had astonishing curves. Its cheongsam-like long dress clung to its skin. The exposed skin was shockingly pale, and there were faint blue blood flowing through its veins and under its skin. When the scream stopped, the Ice Lich closed its mouth and raised its slender arm, putting the ice crown on its head back on. The other sure-kill skill of the Netherworld Ice Coffin, Man in the Coffin, was used at this moment. A ring of glowing icicles appeared around the Ice Lich's body. This ring of Netherworld Ice Ring could increase the effectiveness of the Ice Lich's Ice-type and Ghost-type sure-kill skills by nearly 50% for a short period of time. Although it didn't have the Frost Scepter in its hand this time, the Ice Lich's Magic Burst ability had increased to a shocking degree. Frost Burst. Before the Frost Lich walked out of the ice coffin, Angus Jeffrey yelled. In an instant, the Ice Lich raised its right hand, and countless cold lights poured into its palm from the Netherworld Ice Ring, turning into a cold whirlpool. Then it suddenly waved its hand, and the whirlpool in its palm turned into a wave of ice that rushed out. Wherever the wave of ice passed, frost condensed and spread, freezing more than half of the area. When the wave of ice disappeared, Kettle, who was blocking in front of the red magic ball, had turned into an ice sculpture. The magic ball behind it couldn't completely dodge the Frost Burst's attack, and half of its barrier was frozen. Even though the power of the attack had been weakened, the red cube's HP had dropped from 8,000 to 6,100. Feel the pain. Angus Jeffrey's voice suddenly became louder, and a slightly crazy smile appeared on his face. On the red team's platform, when the red magic ball's life barrier was attacked, Dake's expression changed. He felt an extremely cold attack, and a sharp pain exploded in his chest. It was as if he was attacked by the Frost Burst. He suddenly grabbed his chest, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Rage +1. The cold and the sharp pain made him understand more about the dual domain. If he didn't understand the nature of the dark game, he would have most likely fallen into fear. But now he relied on his strong self-control to successfully control his emotions, and he immediately began to use the normal summoning spell. This third summoning should have been completed, but it was interrupted by the sudden sharp pain. Fortunately, the Frost Lich didn't have the Frost Scepter, so it couldn't continuously use the Frost Burst a second time. Although Kettle was frozen, the Dream Demon, hidden in its body, was lucky enough to survive. As the red light of the Gem of Fear shone from within, the ice on the surface of Kettle's body cracked inch by inch. Relying on the sure kill skill Sturdy, it managed to survive. However, it only had 1 point of magic left out of its 900 points. This meant that it couldn't use any sure kill skills. Even if it was used as a sacrifice, the success rate of the sacrifice was almost 0. Therefore, although it was still alive, it was already dead. Unless Dake could get an energy potion. But its mission was completed. Not only did it protect the Dream Demon from the terrifying explosion of the 7-star magic fairy, it also weakened the magic ball's damage, and it also changed the sure kill skill of the Frost Lich. When the light of bliss shone from the sky, it knew that its mission was completed. Next, it was the Dream Demon, as home ground. Dake Diming's unusual calmness shocked Angus Jeffrey. Before this duel, every duelist who had dueled with him would feel fear after experiencing pain, which would greatly affect their subsequent performance. However, Dark, who was only 13 years old, gritted his teeth and endured the pain after letting out a painful cry. This calmness almost made him think that his opponent already knew the secret of the duel domain. However, Dake's probing before the duel told him that he didn't know. Since that was the case, it could only be explained that his mental fortitude was too strong. Let's see how long you can endure. Angus Jeffrey couldn't help but grit his teeth. The more the magic fairy's life barrier decreased, the more pain the duelist would have to endure. This kind of continuous and gradual pain would cause almost everyone to collapse. He didn't believe that a 13-year-old spoiled brat could endure it forever. Angus Jeffrey suddenly shouted, "Frost Lich, kill him!" The Frost Lich, that had lost its most powerful attack, still had a sure kill defensive skill and a sure kill control skill. Even in close combat, it wouldn't be weaker than a 5-star or 6-star magic fairy. It was a pity that after the underworld ice coffin was broken, its magic power would drop to the lowest point, and it would lose the possibility of being used as a sacrifice. Otherwise, he could still rely on the underworld ice coffin and the sleeved bear to summon a 6-star magic fairy. Now, he could only continue to bury his pawns and wait for the second round to begin. Of course, the prerequisite was that Dake Dimon could survive the first round. Angus Jeffrey stared at the arena and turned the third magic card to his right hand. However, while he was thinking, the Dream Demon bathed in the light of bliss rapidly evolved, turning from its original childlike appearance to a more mature girl. When the pink light was completely absorbed, it had already turned into a magical girl wearing a pointed hat. It was as if a Dream Demon that had walked out from the abyss of hell, exuding a powerful aura that far exceeded the stars. A 5-star Dream Demon and a 7-star Frost Lich. The difference in their attributes wasn't as big as expected. The Dream Demon's magic attack and defense were 2700, 2500, 1600. The Frost Lich's magic attack and defense were only 3500, 2500, 2000. Both of them were undying species and had the ghost attribute. In terms of appearance, the Frost Lich was more mature. At this moment, the female commentator on the platform was speechless. She didn't know why Kettle didn't die, nor did she know why the Dream Demon could evolve into a Dream Demon. Of course, under such an anxious situation, no one would pay attention to her. At this moment, Dake Dimon, who had experienced the cruel side of the dark duel, had lost the patience to deal with Angus Jeffrey. He stretched out his hand and decisively ordered, "Dream Demon, open up the space." Demonic Mimi Heartsuit, the Dream Demon didn't feel the slightest bit of danger in the atmosphere. After it coquettishly called out, it abruptly spread out its tentacles and unleashed its killing move. Nightmare Realm. In an instant, thick purple smoke erupted from beneath his body, spreading out in all directions in a seemingly slow but fast manner. In the blink of an eye, the thick purple smoke covered the entire red side of the arena and continued to spread towards the blue side. Could it be another arena-type killing move? Angus Jeffrey, who had experienced the pain of the Sin World during his previous duel with Dake, had a very bad premonition. And his premonition was obviously correct. Following his orders, the Frost Lich, that was rapidly sliding towards Dake on the ice surface, suddenly became like a tortoise crawling in a quagmire. Originally, with its speed, it could quickly break into the red side summoning area. But now it only felt that the red side summoning area was getting further and further away from it. Following that, it suddenly saw a ray of red light flying from its right side, attacking its side like lightning. Hiss! The Frost Lich didn't slow down in its attack speed. It instantly opened its sharp claws and viciously clawed at the red light. But the real piercing pain came from its left side, leaving a deep wound on its body. Magic power violently leaked out. Its ferocious claws grabbed nothing but air. That beam of red light also flickered, disappearing without a trace. Ah! The frost lich suddenly howled, its claws frantically clawing at its surroundings, but to no avail. With its intelligence level, it couldn't possibly figure out what was going on. The dream demon's figure had already disappeared from the nightmare realm, without a trace. As it grasped more knowledge, its utilization of the nightmare realm was no longer the same as before. The frost lich only saw that ray of red light once again appearing in front of its eyes, but a sharp pain came from its back. Another wound appeared on its back. The dream demon's laughter echoed in the nightmare realm. An aura that made people shudder gradually spread out. It's an illusory realm technique. On the blue side's platform, Angus Jeffrey tightly grasped the magic card in his hand. Illusions and illusory realm techniques were extremely troublesome to deal with, sometimes even more terrifying than stealth. But a magic fairy with such a technique was extremely rare. Angus Jeffrey had some impression of the dream demon, and knew that Dake had summoned it before. But only now did he know that this magic fairy actually had such a terrifying technique. Frost Lich used Frost Magic Shield. The icy chill from the gray flame on his forehead allowed him to act calmly even when his emotions were in turmoil. The magic card in his hand had already completed its summoning. In the blue side's summoning area, a brand new magic fairy had already appeared. It was a magic fairy in the shape of a snowball. Its overall appearance was like a snow slime, but in reality it wasn't. Card name, Liyuan Snow Essence. Type, Fairy Card. Level, *****. Race, Elemental. Attribute, Ice Magic Power, 1000. Attack, 0 Defense, 2000. Killing Skills, Elemental Regeneration Snowball. The Liyuan Snow Essence with an attack of 0 had a defense that surpassed the top 3 stars. Its killing skill, Elemental Regeneration, allowed it to regenerate in an environment with a high concentration of ice elements. As for the killing skill Snowball, it could only be used in a snowy environment. It could make it gradually grow larger in the process of rolling. And its original 0 attack would also gradually increase until it reached the upper limit of 3,000 points. Without a doubt, this Liyuan Snow Essence was just like the Liyuan Ice Essence that had the Ice Elemental Heart. It was an extremely rare and powerful magic guide spirit. But in the current environment, it couldn't use its killing skills. Angus Jeffrey stretched out his hand and ordered, Liyuan Snow Essence, protect the magic crystal ball. Thus, the magic fairy immediately stuffed the blue magic crystal ball into its body, which was equivalent to providing it with 2,000 points of defense. It seemed that Jeffrey was guarding against the sudden attack of the dream demon. At the same time, after the Frost Magic Shield, the Frost Magic Shield's defense increased to 2,750 points, and it also obtained a 37.5% damage reduction effect. In addition, the Frost Magic Shield could also cause a small amount of frost damage to the opponent in close range. It had to be said that this was the correct response. The Dream Demon, with only 2,500 points of attack, could no longer cause any effective damage to the Dream Demon. However, the Dream Demon's erratic movements made the Frost Lich completely unable to catch it, and both sides entered a stalemate. Tick! The sound of the turn changing suddenly rang out. The two duelists who were fully focused reached out their hands to draw cards. The next 2 magic cards will be the key to breaking this stalemate. Dake immediately added the 2 magic cards into his hand. Energy Potion, Moon God Soul Eye. Energy Potion. Dake's eyes flashed, and he immediately began to summon. In the name of Dake Dimung, magic summoning. 3 seconds later, a round flask filled with a blue and white potion fell from the sky. On the ground, the dispirited kettle slightly raised its head and smashed the flask. As the blue and white liquid sprinkled down, its magic instantly recovered to 201 points. Busy. Kettle's eyes focused. Relying on strength cantrip and equal defense, it could immediately reduce the Frost Lich's defense, and then the Dream Demon could take advantage of the gap to attack. It quickly calculated the various values in its mind. With the Frost Lich's base defense of 2,000 points, it would be 1,000 points after being halved. With the Frost Magic Shield and Underworld Ice Ring S buff, it would be 1,375 points. The Dream Demon S attack was 2,500 points, and one hit could cause around 1125 points of damage. The Frost Lich should have around 2,500 points of magic left. If it was only the Dream Demon attacking alone, it would need 3 hits to kill it. However, the Dream Demon was not the only one in the red team summoning area. After accurately calculating, Kettle once again called out and immediately began to use its ultimate skill, Strength Cantrip. Its ultimate skill had an area limit, but it could basically be used in the red team summoning area. As the light of its ability shone, Kettle's attack and defense first completed the exchange. Then when its defense became 0, it used its ultimate skill, Equal Defense, on the Frost Lich. The Frost Lich's defense instantly fell. Demon Mimi. The Dream Demon, who understood Kettle's ability thoroughly, did not hesitate to charge at the Frost Lich. The same red light flashed, and the same invisible attack. The Frost Lich could not differentiate between real and fake. Although its master knew that the red light was only used to lure it, it could not tell where the Dream Demon was, let alone command it. The Frost Magic Shield of the Frost Lich was completely torn apart. It immediately let out a hurried scream and injected magic into the Frost Magic Shield that was about to disappear. But in the next moment, its eyes suddenly widened, and it once again saw a red light mixed with yellow rushing towards it like lightning. At that moment it realized that the red lightning this time should be real, and it wanted to use Sinister Gaze with its magic. However, the speed of the red lightning was too fast and it could not react at all. The Frost Magic Shield that it had just injected some magic into was completely torn apart. Then the Dream Demon appeared behind it and turned around to attack with its claws. This 7-star Frost Lich was actually turned into magic and dissipated under the toying of the 2 magic elves. At this moment, there was an uproar in the circular corridor. However, the situation was so tense that it was suffocating. Other than the exclamations, there was no discussion. Angus Jeffrey finally drew a venue card, but he chose to summon another 6-star Magic Elven card. However, he did not expect that when he sacrificed the 6-star Magic Elven card to summon the Frost Magic Shield, the Frost Magic Shield would be killed so easily. If it was in the past, he would definitely lose control of his emotions the moment the Frost Lich was killed. But now he was like a schizophrenic. While he was shocked and angry, he calmly carried out the operation. The Sleeved White Bear and Liyuan Snow Essence on the field turned into light and merged with the light released from the Magic Elven card to form a huge sacrificial summoning array. That 6-star Magic Guiding Fairy had been successfully summoned. Card name, Liyuan Fog Demon. Type, Elven card. Level, Race, Undying. Attribute, Spectre/Ice. Magic 3000, Attack 2500, Defense 1000. Ultimate skill, Body of Mist, Distant Plains Ice Mist, Beheading in the Mist. What appeared in everyone's vision was shockingly a ball of icy fog emitting a faint blue radiance. The fog floated in the air, and there were 3 pitch-black holes in what seemed to be its face. The wind that blew through the holes made a whistling sound, and it was eerie and cold. Angus Jeffrey abruptly slammed the table and shouted in a deep voice, "Let the icy mist of the desert of separation enter this place and completely destroy that illusory world." Who? The wind whistled, like the wailing of ghosts and howling of wolves. The Liyuan Fog Demon immediately blew out the icy fog. The same bewildering barrier effect surged from the blue half to the red half. The Nightmare Realm that had already forced its way into the blue half was instantly obstructed by the icy fog emitting a faint blue radiance. The icy fog became thicker and thicker, and soon it covered the entire blue half. Looking down from above, the arena was separated into 2 worlds by the purple fog and the blue icy fog. The playful laughter of the Dream Demon and the ghostly wailing of the Liyuan Fog Demon resounded simultaneously. The Nightmare Realm did not disperse like Angus Jeffrey expected. It was dispersed by the Liyuan Ice Fog. He fiercely picked up that field card, preparing to summon it after the cooldown ended. At the same time, he had already ordered the Fog Beheading to the Liyuan Fog Beheading. Dake also said to the dream demon. Confusion tactic. Using a 5-star magical guide sprite to fight against a 6-star magical guide sprite. It was originally unwise. Furthermore, he did not know anything about the 6-star magical guide sprite. Now that Hohu had sacrificed himself, he was left with only a dream demon. Although it was sufficient to defend, it was insufficient to attack. He might as well wait for the next round to consider. Of course, if Angus Jeffrey chose to initiate an attack, he would not mind letting him taste the pain of the curse. As soon as he finished speaking, the Liyuan fog demon instantly dived into the icy fog. Its figure flashed, and the Liyuan fog demon completely disappeared. Its body blended into the fog, stealthily moving without a trace. The icy fog at the intersection between the Liyuan ice fog and the nightmare realm suddenly gathered and ferociously drilled into the nightmare realm. 5 and 1 10,000 plus 130/233 brothers, cast your minimum monthly votes and razor blades. 3. Chapter 518. In the blink of an eye, the icy mist transformed into a gigantic drill, ferociously drilling into the purple mist. Even though the nightmare realm was not dispelled, the Liyuan icy mist had successfully infiltrated it. Angus Jeffrey's expression softened slightly. Dake's expression turned grave. There was a clear disparity in the control of the field between the two elves. The nightmare realm was truly too profound. The dream demon was still at the stage of adapting to the field, and had yet to reach the stage of controlling the field. But the Liyuan misty demon's control over the icy mist was like an extension of its arm. When it followed Jeffrey's request and executed the misty beheading technique, its control over the icy mist was raised to the upper limit. After the icy mist drilled into the nightmare realm, it abruptly exploded. Then a faint blue icy mist appeared within the purple mist. Relying on the misty body to blend into the mist, the Liyuan misty demon was like a fish shuttling through the mist. Even the dream demon was unable to capture its traces. When the dream demon hurriedly turned its head to search for traces of the Liyuan misty demon, the icy mist that floated behind its neck suddenly congealed into a sharp ice blade, carrying a chilling aura as it sliced through the back of its neck. Remember in a second. https://m. But can't you? VIP the dream demon's head and body were separated in that split second. But when Angus Jeffrey's eyes revealed a look of surprise, the dream demon's head suddenly turned into mist. It was actually an illusion. Wanting to hit the dream demon in the nightmare realm? Unless one had an ability like the true dragon's eye, that allowed one to see the truth. The ice blade congealed from the icy mist instantly melted, and the Liyuan misty demon once again hid within the icy mist. Its original speed was extremely fast, but it was unable to move normally within the nightmare realm. Only by completely transforming into an icy mist would it be able to break free from the nightmare realm's restraints. After its technique failed, it started to look for an opportunity. Angus Jeffrey, on the other hand, had successfully activated the venue card, Frigid Lands of Departure. Combining the fog demon's field skill with this field card will definitely be able to dispel the illusion. Once this place is dispelled, Dake's magic elf will lose its hiding place. Angus Jeffrey abruptly raised the frigid earth of Liyuan high in the air. The blue light emitted from the card penetrated the layers of icy mist and shone directly on the ground. The layer of ice on the ground thickened under the effect of the Liyuan frozen earth and spread from the blue summoning area all the way to the red area. Liyuan frozen earth and Liyuan icy mist complemented each other, and the effect was even better when the two were combined. The cold wind whistled, and the temperature of the arena dropped rapidly. The blue half of the zone had become the home ground of the ice element. As for the purple smoke in the red team's half, it was finally defeated by the combination of the frost and ice mist. It was constantly being forced back to the red team's summoning area. But in reality, the smoke was just an external effect of the nightmare realm. The territory it occupied did not shrink in the slightest. It was just that the Liyuan frozen earth and Liyuan icy mist did corrode the nightmare realm. Under the support of the Liyuan frozen earth The 3 attributes of the Liyuan Fog Demon also received an overall boost. It cruised in the fog, quickly searching for the Dream Demon's true location. The countdown for the second phase was decreasing by the second. Angus Jeffrey once again summoned a magic card, Crystal Guard, and used a hexagonal crystal barrier to surround the blue magic sphere. Although it obstructed the movement of the magic sphere, it also provided it with a necessary protection. As for himself, the moment the icy mist drifted into the red team's summoning area, he abruptly issued a command. Fog Beheading, target, red magic sphere. The front part of the icy mist instantly condensed into a sharp ice blade, silently slashing towards the magic-conducting ball in the red team's summoning zone. This sudden attack was extremely fatal. Dake wanted to release his magic power to deflect the magic sphere, but it was already too late. But to everyone's surprise, the ice blade actually sliced through the magic-conducting ball's body. Then the red magic-conducting ball shattered into a mirage just like the Dream Demon. Angus Jeffrey's expression suddenly froze. He suddenly realized that before the Nightmare Realm was completely dispelled, or before the Dream Demon was destroyed, it would be extremely difficult for him to pinpoint the location of the red magic sphere. And such a degree of illusion transformation, to the Dream Demon, was simply a piece of cake. The essence of the so-called confusion tactic was to create illusions, to confuse the opponent between reality and illusion, and to make them unable to attack. The ice surface created by the Liyuan frozen earth had already invaded more than half of the red team's summoning area. A faint blue icy mist disturbed the Nightmare Realm. But it was all useless. Angus Jeffrey urgently thought of a way to deal with it, his forehead dripping with cold sweat. Dake used this period of time to completely calm down the effects of the sharp pain in his chest. He calmly touched the deck, waiting for the next turn, and suddenly drew a card. Magical Beast, Ever-Changing Monster, Ball Sea Lion, Ever-Changing Monster and Ball Sea Lion? Ever-Changing Monster can transform into a 2-legged humanoid to meet the Luminous Envoy's requirement. Ball Sea Lion contains Bliss Factor. It can use the Moon God's Soul Eye to evolve into a Moon God. The former is difficult to use because the ever-changing monster only has 100 MP. The latter is enough to break through this situation. Dake's brain was rapidly working. He originally wanted to evolve the little demon beast into a Heidi Road beast, then evolve it. But with the Ball Sea Lion in his hands, he no longer needed it. Without hesitation, after his thoughts cleared, Dake immediately started summoning. Dream Demon. Mayo, with just a reminder, the Dream Demon seemed to have telepathy as it responded to Dake's request. 3 seconds later, the summoning light released from the spherical sea lion card fell into the Nightmare Realm. All of a sudden, numerous icy mists came from all directions and surrounded the spot where the summoning light was going to land. However, nothing appeared in the summoning light. The Ball Sea Lion's true summoning position was above, and before it appeared, it was shrouded in an illusion. The Dream Demon hugged the orb sea lion in her arms and flew freely in the Nightmare Realm. She even used a tentacle to drag the red magic ball behind her, looking like a baby carrier. Seeing that the Ball Sea Lion was safe, Dake immediately started summoning the Moon God Soul Eye. After the cooldown ended, at the blue side summoning area, a new summoning array appeared. After Angus Jeffrey drew out 2 new magic cards, his face lit up with joy. He immediately summoned a 4-star magic guide sprite, Liyuan Ice Essence. On the Liyuan Frozen Earth, any ice-type sprite that wasn't higher than the 2nd tier could be summoned. Furthermore, the Liyuan Ice Essence still had the ultimate skill, Ice Heart. When it appeared in the blue side summoning area, the surrounding dense ice elements were continuously absorbed into its body. The Liyuan Ice Essence, that was originally a snowflake, started to grow rapidly. From the core of the snowflake, countless ice thorns sprouted out, intertwining into a gigantic ice ball. And its magic power value also continued to rise from the initial 1,000 points. It would only take 10 seconds for it to reach the upper limit of 3,000 points of magic power. Its size would also expand to 3 meters. Dark had a deep impression of this magic guide elf that was a pure spellcaster. Whether it was Blizzard, Icicle Spear Ray, or Freezing Ray, they were all ice attribute surekill skills. Although the dream demon had concealed its figure in the nightmare realm, its physical body still existed. It would still be attacked by the area ultimate skills. Furthermore, the ability to create illusions would consume a large amount of MP. Angus Jeffrey must have determined that the dream demon didn't have much MP left, and wanted to use a large area of effect magic to kill it. Once the dream demon revealed a trace in the nightmare realm, the Liyuan fog demon's fog beheading technique would swiftly follow up. After summoning the Liyuan ice essence, Angus Jeffrey didn't stop. After activating the next magic guide card, in the blue side summoning area, an icy obelisk was erected. That obelisk was 5 to 6 meters tall. The top of the obelisk even reached the height of the contestant stage. For a moment, one couldn't tell if it was a magic guide sprite, or a tool or magic. Dake's knowledge didn't contain any information about this obelisk, thus it was hard to guess. But his summoning had already been completed. Gather your prayers and become a new silver moon. Transform into a shining silver moon, armed evolution. Moon God. The image of the moon god's spirit appeared behind the ball sea lion, opening its arms to embrace it. The dream demon quietly retreated. The illusion that was cast on the ball sea lion was instantly broken by the dense power of the moon god. The ball sea lion's body appeared in front of everyone for the first time. But in an instant, a huge silver mirror appeared behind the image of the moon god's spirit, releasing a strong light that instantly surrounded the ball sea lion's body. It continuously penetrated into it, allowing it to obtain a temporary evolution ability. Under the brilliance of the silver moon, the life form of the ball sea lion underwent a drastic change. From the appearance of a small sea lion, it gradually stretched into a slender human form. With a clear gender, after evolving, it presented a body shape similar to that of a woman. The lips and chin that were exposed from the purple mask were sensual and delicate. When the silver armor appeared one by one around its body, it immediately opened its arms and began to wear it. The silver armor was tightly attached to its graceful curves, perfectly displaying the contours of its torso. The mask on its head and the cylindrical sensors on its ears formed a V-shaped structure. The silver mirror flew to its chest and shrunk into a heart protection mirror with mysterious runes. Mo. The ball sea lion let out an excited cry. Although this was not the first time it had undergone armed evolution, each attempt brought a new feeling to it. The carefree feeling of evolving in all aspects was endless no matter how many times it experienced it. Through this evolution, it could slightly make up for its regret of not being able to evolve into the West Lion Siren. Of course, in the current environment, it wasn't a good time to think about this. Its slender eyes suddenly became focused. At this moment, the ball sea lion had completely evolved into the moon god. The powerful aura of the 6-star magic guide fairy quickly spread out. Under the buff of the passive skill, Divine Personality Armament, the moon god not only had its hypostasis increased, but it was also immune to most directional and shape-shifting surekill skills. Its magic attack and defense had both increased by 1,000 points. This caused the 6-star magic guide fairy's magic attack and defense to reach a terrifying value of 4,000 points. Obviously, this was the value that only a perfect 8-star magic guide fairy could have. It relied on the floating ability of the armor to float in the air, and its slender limbs glowed with a faint silver light like moonlight. Its gaze swept across the ice mist under its feet, as if it was looking down on the world. Just like how the dream demon's physical body didn't disappear, even though the Liyuan fog demon had merged into the ice mist, its body still existed in the mist and would be attacked by area-type surekill skills. The dream demon also had an area-type surekill skill. However, although the moonlight summoned by lunar eclipse was thick, unless all 12 moonlight were summoned at the same time, its range wouldn't be enough. Therefore, it needed to lure the Liyuan fog demon out. However, while the moon god was thinking about this, Dake pointed out another path. Attack the magic guide ball. The Liyuan fog demon was hiding in the ice mist and was difficult to capture, while the Liyuan ice essence was absorbing the ice element and growing rapidly. Attacking the magic guide ball was the best way to break the situation. Unlike the red magic guide ball that was hidden by illusions, the blue magic guide ball was only protected by a layer of crystal guardian. No matter what kind of magic it was, it couldn't block the moon god's attack. The thing that needed to be paid attention to was the obelisk that had an unknown function. In the blink of an eye, half of the third round had passed. The tip of the moon god's foot tapped, and the air rippled like water. Then it rose up and left the nightmare realm's area of effect. Once it left the nightmare realm, the sluggish feeling of walking in a quagmire instantly disappeared. Its body was as light as a swallow, and its whole body was filled with a sense of condensed power. Without any gap, the moon god instantly sprinted towards the blue half. Its body almost turned into a beam of silver light. The Liyuan ice essence was accumulating power to cast Blizzard. When it suddenly heard Angus Jeffrey's shout, it immediately switched to Freezing Ray. Its body slightly rotated, and the icy blue ray shot upwards. The ray formed an arc as it moved, blocking the air. However, its activation speed was still a beat slower. The moon god had already appeared behind it. It didn't use any sure-kill skills. The moon god's fingers closed together and turned into a hand blade. As it turned, it slashed out. Only a crash sound was heard. The Liyuan ice essence's body was instantly split apart. Then, it let out a hurried long cry. Countless amounts of icy mist suddenly erupted, rolling back towards the blue team's half. The Liyuan fog demon that was hiding in it returned to the blue half with the ice fog, then exposed its body and desperately accelerated. But at this time, the moon god had already slashed the Liyuan ice essence a second time. It formed a cross and cut the Liyuan ice essence into 4 parts. Its body then exploded into magic starlight. However, the starlight scattered and was absorbed by the obelisk. The moon god glanced at it. After that, it didn't even pay attention to the Liyuan fog demon that was desperately rushing back. It raised its right hand, and a beam of moonlight shot into the sky from its fingertip. The sky suddenly lit up with a silver brilliance. Then a clear beam of moonlight suddenly fell, and with the force of a thunderbolt, it blasted on the crystal guardian. Boom! There was an explosion. It completely covered the ticking sound of the turn change. The crystal guardian actually cracked open. Then the second moonlight fell straight down. Under the control of the moon god, the moonlight that was slightly condensed and as thick as a bucket once again blasted on the crystal barrier. Boom! The crystal barrier was completely shattered, and the broken magic was also absorbed into the obelisk. Get up! Angus Jeffrey, who was in the middle of the blue team's platform, suddenly roared. The 2 new cards of the 4th round had not been obtained yet, so he concentrated on the output of magic and control. The blue magic conducting ball instantly sprung up and moved horizontally, instantly dodging the 3rd beam of moonlight. The moon god instantly narrowed its eyes, and with a tap of its toes, its right hand slashed at the magic ball like a knife. In the sky above, the remaining 9 beams of moonlight lost control and fell rapidly like meteors, continuously bombarding the blue half of the region. Countless ice fog was blasted away, and the ice formed by the Liyuan frozen earth on the ground also cracked layer by layer. The effect of the arena was affected because of this. The Liyuan fog demon that hurriedly returned took a moonlight that poured down on its head. Its weak defense of only 1,000 points was completely unable to resist the moonlight's bombardment. Although it used body of fog to merge into the ice fog at the critical moment, it still could not escape the moonlight's damage. In just a few seconds, it was literally blasted into pieces. The moon god did not even look at it. Then, under the pressure of the moon god, the blue magic ball finally could not avoid the moonlight's bombardment. A huge beam of light suddenly blasted down, and the magic power that Angus Jeffrey infused on it was blasted away. In that instant, Angus Jeffrey suffered a huge amount of damage, causing him to let out a blood-curdling scream. However, the gray flame on its forehead suddenly jumped up, and it actually made it reach out to the deck while trembling. With 2 new magic cards in hand, it began to summon in an extremely strange state. A cloud of magic suddenly surged out from the ground, and drilled into the blue magic ball. The vitality enchantment that was originally on the verge of shattering was repaired. The health points that had fallen below half were restored to more than half. However, the moon god's attack immediately shattered the vitality enchantment again. Ah! Angus Jeffrey let out another shrill scream. His face contorted intensely because of this. The excruciating pain caused by the 2 consecutive attacks on the magic-conducting ball made him tremble all over. How could the son of a count, who had never experienced physical pain since he was born, withstand this bone-piercing pain? In extreme pain, his gaze shone on the red contestant's platform opposite him. At this time, Dake had also taken out 2 new magic cards. He held one of the magic cards in his hand, and his lips moved quickly. Then a new summoning light lit up in the red contestant's summoning circle. What appeared in the summoning circle was the giant dragon egg that once gave Angus Jeffrey nightmares. In the name of Angus Jeffrey, I summon the magic. The situation quickly took a turn for the worse. But this was the charm of a magic duel. From one moment to the next, victory or defeat was only a flip of the palm. Angus Jeffrey's face was distorted by the pain, but he still managed to control the magic ball from a distance and summon the magic card at the same time. This was a domain that he had always been unable to break through, but now he had achieved it unconsciously. When the blue magic ball dragged the shattered vitality enchantment away from the moon god's attack again, a second obelisk rose from the ground between the blue magic ball and the moon god, blocking the moon god that wanted to chase up. At this time in the arena, the nightmare realm occupied the red half of the arena. The dream demon brought the red magic ball and hid within. The giant dragon egg appeared in the red side summoning circle, shaking slightly. In the blue half of the arena, there was only the shattered ice surface and the floating ice fog that had yet to disperse. This meant that the arena effect had not completely disappeared. Angus Jeffrey no longer had a magic elf. There were only 2 obelisks erected in 2 different directions. The first obelisk that was summoned was attacked by a beam of moonlight, and there were already cracks on the wall. The black light that was originally emitted from absorbing the magic power of the dead magic fairy had once again withered. It was probably this obelisk that repaired the blue magic ball's vitality enchantment that was on the verge of shattering. After repairing the vitality enchantment, there was still magic power left inside, but it was obviously not much. Dake did not think that the obelisk's effect was only to repair the vitality enchantment of the magic ball, so he did not let down his guard. The second obelisk that rose from the ground had a subtle difference in appearance from the first one. But the aura that both emitted was the same, filthy and evil. Ha ha ha! Angus Jeffrey slightly recovered. His painful expression was not exposed under the cover of the dual domain. The arrogant attitude of looking down on others with his nostrils had completely collapsed. His bloodshot eyes were filled with viciousness and hatred. Dake did not know why this person hated him so much. He could only attribute it to the influence of the gray flame. In short, after revealing a fierce gaze, Angus Jeffrey slowly spat out 4 words from his mouth. Underworld shackles. Then, gray flames suddenly emerged from the 2 obelisks. The gray flames at the edge of the field seemed to have resonated with it, and suddenly burned fiercely. The chaotic light of the flames was reflected in the field, causing shadows to crisscross. The gray flames that emerged from the 2 obelisks quickly condensed into the shape of chains. The moon god, who was in between the 2 obelisks, felt an extremely strong binding force before the chains shot out. Its movement speed became sluggish because of this. Whoosh! Whoosh! In that instant, the chains condensed from gray flames flew out from the 2 obelisks. Like a snake, they quickly wrapped around the moon god's hands and spiraled upwards, entangling its body. Then the 2 gray chains suddenly tightened, binding the slender moon god in the air. Angus Jeffrey stared at the tied-up moon god, until he was sure that it couldn't break free after trying to struggle. Then he suddenly let out a maniacal laugh. Ka-cha-cha! The huge dragon egg in the red summoning area suddenly cracked open, and the green-eyed baby dragon broke out of the shell. Angus Jeffrey's expression suddenly froze. But at the edge of his vision, he suddenly saw the figure of the dream demon appear at the edge of the nightmare realm. Then, this ghost-like 5-star magic guide sprite rushed out of the nightmare realm, and flew towards the blue magic guide ball. The dream demon's floating speed was not fast or slow, but it was more than enough to catch up to the magic guide ball. Angus Jeffrey hurriedly injected his magic power, controlling the magic guide ball to circle around the two obelisks. The magic power in the moon god's body flowed along the two gray chains into the two obelisks. The black light in the obelisks once again shone. When the dream demon chased over, the top of the second obelisk condensed a black ball of light. That ball of light instantly turned into a pitch-black ray of light, hitting the dream demon who wasn't too prepared. Me. The dream demon let out a shrill shriek and subconsciously retreated back into the nightmare realm. Its magic power was instantly depleted by this attack. Dake's eyes revealed a look of shock. He carefully observed the structure of the two obelisks. When the black ball of light condensed, it seemed like the black light had spread to the moon god's body. Obviously, the power of the black ray originated from the moon god. Not only can it absorb the magic power of a dead magic guide spirit, it can also create chains to bind the opponent and absorb the opponent's magic power to attack and heal. What is the origin of these two obelisks? Dake's heart sank, giving the order to release the light spirit hall to the cyanide WIREM that broke out of its shell. The light spirit hall and the nightmare realm did not conflict. As a field skill released by a magic guide spirit refined by the same magus, they would not repel each other. But the Frozen Plains desert would be expelled by the light spirit hall. The two field skills were enough to suppress it. Roar! The cyanide WIREM raised its head. From its dragon wings suddenly erupted a holy white light, converging into a blazing ball of light like the sun. The snow-like feathers of light sprinkled down from the sky. The Frozen Plains desert that invaded the red half of the ice surface was quickly melted by the warm white light. Then, the white light invaded the blue team's territory, quickly melting the frozen soil that was already broken apart. Seeing that the field effect of the Frozen Plains desert was about to disappear, Angus Jeffrey's pupil shrank. He continued to control the magic guide ball while casting a new summoning spell. The other magic guide card in his hand lit up. The giant demon of Liyuan, that could be specially summoned on the Frozen Plains desert, once again stepped onto the stage of the duel. This 4-meter-tall, 5-star magic guide spirit with long snowy white hair and scarlet eyes like a giant ape, had a strength that was not inferior to the dream demon. Each of its 3 sure-kill skills was useful. This was especially true for the undead curse, which could weaken, stiffen, and slow down the magic elf it killed. It was the equivalent of crippling a magic elf. In the previous duel, Dake relied on the dragon egg transformation of the young cyanide WIREM to disperse the effect of the undead curse. This time, of course, he could use the same strategy. The only thing he needed to pay attention to was whether the obelisk could release a second black light. From the fact that it was still absorbing the magic of the moon god, this was extremely possible. Dake's brain was working very quickly. Although the dream demon's magic was almost depleted, it was actually an extremely good situation for it. It was just that in Angus Jeffrey's field, there was no opponent worthy of it sharing its life with. After the young cyanide WIREM released the Hall of Light, there was no need to be afraid. Even if the obelisk could release a second black light, it would be useless. Therefore, after thinking, he immediately let the young cyanide WIREM attack the obelisk. The goal was to destroy it. From the cracks on the first obelisk, it could be seen that both obelisks could be destroyed. The ability to bind the moon god obviously required both obelisks to exist at the same time. As long as the first obelisk that was damaged was destroyed, the moon god would be able to break free. These were the most basic considerations. Although the young cyanide WIREM did not particularly understand Dake's command, it still took a step forward. It carefully went around the edge of the field and charged towards the obelisk. The dream demon purposely opened up a small path for it. But when it charged towards the first obelisk, the giant fiend of Liyuan also roared and charged towards it under Angus Jeffrey's command. But at this time, the frozen ground of Liyuan's field effect had completely disappeared. Relying on the giant fiend of Liyuan's 2,500 points of attack, it was already unable to break through the young cyanide WIREM-S dragon scales. Instead, the young cyanide WIREM that had 3,000 points of attack knocked the giant fiend of Liyuan, which only had 1,200 points of defense, away in an instant. The giant fiend of Liyuan's body fiercely crashed into the first obelisk, but it immediately stood up and released the hibernation freezing air towards the young cyanide WIREM. The freezing air that had a hypnotic effect instantly sprayed out. This cyanide baby dragon had already been hit by the hibernation freezing air, but it still charged forward and was hit by the hibernation freezing air. But before it was hypnotized, it took the initiative to use the dragon's reverse scale, using its anger to wash away its sleepiness. This scene was like a repeat of the previous duel. The young cyanide WIREM's attack power was greatly increased because of this, but its mind fell into a chaotic state after going berserk. It did not hesitate to launch an attack on the nearest unit. The giant fiend of Liyuan was once again smashed into dust. Then, as expected, the undead curse was triggered. A ball of pitch-black magic with a ghost-like howl drilled into the face of the young cyanide WIREM, causing its body to instantly stiffen. From inside to outside, it emerged a deathly pale color like a corpse. It was as if it had turned into a zombie. Dake picked up the Pride 2 in his hand. This was the other magic card that he had drawn in this round, using the low-level Great Sin card to let the young cyanide WIREM escape from its chaotic state and obtain a moment of clarity, then immediately cast the Dragon Egg transformation. This was the strategy that Dake had used before. The young cyanide WIREM also very smoothly turned back into a dragon egg. However, this time, Dake no longer had the Pride 3 in his hand, so he could not let it hatch into the young cyanide WIREM sin. However, the 30-second countdown of the fourth round had ended, and both players could draw 2 more magic cards. However, at the moment when the round changed, the top of the second obelisk once again condensed into a black ball of light, and then fiercely shot out a pitch-black ray of light. The first dragon egg that could not move was immediately hit. A mere 3-star dragon egg could not withstand the attack of this ray of light at all, and it was instantly shattered into pieces. Angus Jeffrey's laughter rang out after that. "Do you think that I will be fooled by the same trick twice?" His voice seemed to be hoarse because of the continuous pain, but the pride in his tone could not be hidden no matter how hard he tried. However, the angry response that he was expecting did not appear. Dake Dimming was still extremely calm as he stretched out his hand to draw a card. During this process, the first dragon egg, that should have been turned into magic, and then absorbed by the obelisk, did not disappear. The white light that had already illuminated the blue half of the area exuded a faint warmth. The body of the first dragon egg recondensed. Although its body was slightly transparent, it seemed to be intact. Hall of Light. The young cyanide dragon offers a prayer, summoning the Hall of Light to descend. The light elemental magic fairy that dies in the Hall of Light will be reborn in the form of a spirit. The duration of the Hall of Light is 3 minutes. The duration of the spirit is 3 minutes, and it will not be affected by the disappearance of the Hall of Light. Due to the fact that not a single one of Dark's light elves had died in the Hall of Light during the last duel, Angus Jeffrey was still in the dark about the effects of this place. When he finally realized the problem, the situation was already desperate. Once the young cyanide WIREM hatched from this spirit dragon egg, the obelisk in front of it would not be able to withstand the full blow of the young dragon. And if this obelisk were to shatter, then the moon god would be able to escape as Dark had expected. At that time, he would no longer have the power to reverse the situation. Unless the gray flame on his forehead burned more and more fiercely. Angus Jeffrey took out 2 magic cards from the deck and put them into his hand. Then he suddenly opened them. Frost Emperor. Frost Scepter. Angus Jeffrey's eyebrows were filled with joy, and his lips almost immediately squirmed. His magic power was mobilized at a speed and stability that had never been seen before. When the spirit, young cyanide WIREM, hatched from the dragon egg, it was slightly late by half a second, and Angus Jeffrey's sacrificial summoning spell was successfully completed. In the arena, the gray flame on the 2 obelisks suddenly flickered violently. The obelisks that would not be ignited by the gray flame began to burn from the bottom. The two obelisks burned at the same time, and the flames that rushed up reflected the entire arena red. The nobles in the circular corridor subconsciously wanted to retreat, but after the flames reflected on their faces, there was no heat produced. It's actually the cold flame. With shock and curiosity, the audience could not help but hold their breaths and stare at the arena, as if they were afraid of missing any frame. The gray flame mixed with the red flame flickered wildly, and the obelisks turned into powder at a speed visible to the naked eye. Gray light drilled out from the two obelisks at the same time, and merged with the white light released by the Frost Emperor, in Angus Jeffrey's hand, forming a sacrificial summoning circle burning with gray flames. And with the sacrifice of the two obelisks at the same time, the two chains condensed by gray flames also lost their effectiveness. The moon god, that was tied up in the air, suddenly broke free from the chains. Although it did not have much magic power left, it was still alive. If it wanted to, it could summon the Moon Palace at this time and immediately recover 1/3 of its magic power. But that kind of indiscriminate healing would always bring about changes. After a short moment of thought, it gave up on the summoning and slowly fell from the air to the ground. It was very tired and weak. Then above the sky, a huge black shadow shrouded over it. What jumped out from the sacrificial summoning circle was the Emperor Penguin, that was as huge as a hill. It jumped from the sky, and its huge body carried a terrifying weight, with an aura that could crush everything. Spread out. When Dake reminded them, the cyanide baby dragon and moon god that were in the blue summoning area quickly retreated. Boom. The Frost Emperor stepped heavily on the ground, and the whole arena shook because of it. Card name, Frost Emperor. Type, Elf card. Level, Race, Bird Beast Attribute, Ice, Magic Power, 4000, Attack, 3500, Defense, 4000, Ultimate Skill, Emperor's Fat, Ice Throne, Emperor's Hibernation. Although it was not a gold card, this 8-star Frost Emperor was the magic elf that Angus Jeffrey was most proud of after spending a lot of effort to refine. Whether it was in the past or now, once he summoned this magic elf, he had never failed. The higher the star level of the magic elf, the lower the probability of its 3 attributes reaching the top values. But this Frost Emperor's magic power and defense had reached perfection at the same time, and its 3500 attack was definitely not low. Just by relying on these terrifying attributes, it could allow it to gallop in front of an ordinary 8-star magic elf. Moreover, its 3 ultimate skills were very powerful. Among them, the core ultimate skill was Emperor's Fat, which could reduce the damage received in battle like Cat Boss's fur coat. It was just that Cat Boss's fur coat could reduce the damage received by half, and Frost Emperor's Emperor's Fat could only reduce the damage received by 30%. However, with its terrifying defense of 4000, even a 5700 attack could not break through its thick fat. If it was combined with the Frost Scepter, that could increase the effect of the Ice-type ultimate skills by 50%. It could make this Frost Emperor essentially invincible. Even if the Frost Emperor's defense was accidentally broken through, its other ultimate skill, Emperor's Hibernation, could allow it to quickly enter a hibernation state and quickly recover its magic power in its sleep. The effect of Emperor's Hibernation was very similar to Snorlax's sleep. It could instantly dispel all abnormal statuses and recover 20% of its magic power every 10 seconds for a total of 60 seconds. This meant that it could recover 120% of its magic power. Although it could only passively take a beating during the 60 seconds of hibernation, as long as it swallowed the magic ball into its body, it did not have to worry about the magic ball being broken. As for the last ultimate skill, Frost Throne, it was a skill that did not match its name. It summoned an ice mountain to kill the opponent. The ice mountain as large as a throne would fall from the sky and kill all the enemies that came to invade. After successfully summoning the Frost Emperor, Angus Jeffrey's entire state changed. He suddenly opened his arms and mocked. Although the process is a little bumpy, the final result will never change. The strong will always be strong, and the weak will always be weak. No matter what era the duel is in, it needs a strong person like me, not weaklings like you who don't even have the most basic respect. Dake patiently listened to his words and suddenly said, "Is the duel in your era about fists to flesh and swords to slash each other? How is that possible? That's what a boorish man would do." Angus Jeffrey suddenly paused, and his face revealed a look of shock that even he did not know why. Dake suddenly shouted, "Moon God!" The moon god, that had just left the range of the Frost Emperor's fall instantly adjusted its posture and turned into moonlight. Its 5 fingers formed a knife hand and slashed at the Frost Emperor's short leg. However, when its knife hand broke through, its expression changed instantly. It felt a soft force surround the side of its hand, and it could not continue to stab in. The moon god immediately retreated after its attack failed. As for Dark, he had a clearer understanding of the defenses of this 8-star magic guide fairy. He glanced at the 2 magic cards that he had just obtained, and decided to summon them. However, Angus Jeffrey suddenly roared hysterically, "Frost Emperor, summon the throne!" The huge fat penguin immediately opened its sharp beak, and let out a long cry at the sky. Beep. The moment it raised its head and opened its mouth, it revealed a mouthful of densely packed sharp teeth. Coupled with its bright red mouth, it was frightening. Above the sky, as countless cold air surged, a huge whirlpool was formed. From the whirlpool of ice, a huge iceberg with a diameter of more than 10 meters slowly descended, emitting a soul-stirring cold air. The audience in the circular corridor instantly went into an uproar, and some people had already begun to retreat. When the huge iceberg completely appeared, even the referee and commentator on the platform could not help but shrink their necks. Then the Frost Emperor let out a sharp cry again, and the huge iceberg actually slightly adjusted its direction and slammed down on the red side of the arena. Demon Mimi, the dream demon, did not panic even when its magic power was almost depleted. It immediately dragged the red magic ball and slipped to the edge of the arena. The baby blue-eyed dragon and moon god stepped out of the nightmare realm and ran to the sides of the arena to dodge. Boom! A thunderous sound was heard, and the earth trembled. The huge iceberg fell to the ground and let out an even more terrifying explosion sound. The ice shards at the bottom of the iceberg that were shattered by the impact shot out in all directions under the Frost Emperor's intentional control, almost covering the entire area of the nightmare realm. The dream demon twisted its body and entered its spirit state. Numerous ice shards pierced through its body, and the remaining frost effect was unable to break through its defense. But suddenly, it discovered that an ice shard was shooting towards the magic ball. It subconsciously transformed into its physical body and blocked the ice shard's attack. Its magic power, which wasn't much to begin with, had truly fallen to the lowest point. Beep. The sound caused by the iceberg had not yet subsided, and the fat emperor penguin actually took a step forward with its short legs and charged towards the red side of the arena. Although its speed did not seem to be fast because of its large strides, its movement speed was not considered slow. Every step it took caused the ground to tremble. When it approached the nightmare realm, it suddenly lowered its body, and its right wing was like a huge blade, sweeping towards the nightmare realm. But the wing naturally swept through the air. Meow, looks like a little girl who isn't too smart. Meow Meow, that was summoned out of the red side's summoning area, pinched its chin and observed the meat mountain. As for why its master summoned it, it was very clear. At the same time, it felt a trace of excitement in its heart. Remove the nightmare realm. Dake's faint voice transmitted from above. Currently, the nightmare realm had become an obstacle for the red side. Once the Frost Emperor stepped in, it would very likely be accelerated. But it seems like Angus Jeffrey did not realize the reality of the nightmare realm from the start, and only treated it as an illusion that could slow down one's speed. The Frost Emperor was only probing from the periphery. A blue light suddenly flashed on the blue side's platform, and an icy blue scepter descended like a meteor. The Frost Emperor extended its wings and swept the frost scepter into its wings. Instantly, icy blue ripples frantically spread out. After obtaining the frost scepter, not only could the Frost Emperor obtain the effects and strength of its Ice-type ultimate skills. It could also refresh the cooldown of one of its ultimate skills. It raised the scepter that was extremely small in comparison to its body, and prepared to release the frozen throne into the nightmare realm once again. But suddenly, it heard a cry, and discovered that the purple fog had automatically dispersed. The red side was no longer obstructed. Then, a tiny gray cat madly dashed towards it. Facing such an ant-like creature, it was too lazy to pay attention to it. Its sharp eyes turned towards the dream demon, and the magic sphere behind it. But at this moment, the dream demon widened its eyes at it. The 3 gems on its chest emitted a glaring red light. A ray of energy shot out from its body, penetrating through the Frost Emperor's thick fat, and connected it to the Frost Emperor's life. Then, the kind and gentle dream demon and the Frost Emperor shared the pain equally. The remaining HP mana of both parties were added together and divided equally. As the mana flowed into its body, the dream demon instantly let out a carefree cry. After the Frost Emperor was stunned for a moment, it suddenly raised its head and roared angrily. But no matter how angry it was, it couldn't stop the loss of HP. Originally, the mana that was used to release the frozen throne was now less than 2,000 points after being divided equally with the dream demon's mana. An unprecedented feeling of emptiness instantly filled its heart. Angus Jeffrey, who was constantly paying attention to the Frost Emperor card, also frowned at this moment. However, Dake Dimming had never let the dream demon use the ultimate skill, pain sharing, in public, so no matter how hard he racked his brains, it was impossible for him to figure out the mystery within such a short period of time. On the contrary, after a few seconds of thinking, he suddenly turned his eyes and saw the Frost Scepter in the Frost Emperor's hand suddenly disappear into thin air. The shock that occurred in that instant caused panic to emerge in his heart. A ray of white light suddenly fell. Meow Meow, who had stolen the Frost Scepter, held the Frost Scepter in its right hand and the ray of white light in its left hand. A gun-shaped driver appeared in its left hand. When Angus Jeffrey saw this scene, he slammed the table almost without pause and roared, "Frost Emperor, stomp it to death!" Meow. The moment the magic gun was in its hand, Meow Meow had already retreated like lightning. The young green-eyed dragon that heard the command went past it and fiercely crashed into the huge fat penguin. Boom. The young green-eyed dragon's full strength was fiercely rebounded by the Frost Emperor's fat. It sat on the ground and felt dizzy, but it also successfully blocked the Frost Emperor's pursuit of Meow Meow. And Meow Meow, who pulled away, did not hesitate to inject mana into the magic gun. As the mana was injected, the top of the magic gun was condensed and a light emblem engraved with a 6-pointed star appeared. Then, it aimed at the empty space in front and excitedly pressed the trigger. Bang! The light emblem that instantly shot out rolled on the ground at high speed and drew a huge 6-pointed star magic circle. Then the magic gun that was the driver disappeared. A huge red robot that looked like it was burning with flames floated out of the hexagram magic array. What is that? Whether it was the commentator on the platform, the audience in the circular corridor, or even Angus Jeffrey on the contestant platform, they all looked at the 6-meter-tall giant robot in confusion. An ancient golem? Someone couldn't help but guess, and it quickly resonated. But then they saw Meow Meow, who had casually thrown the Frost Scepter to the Dream Demon, run towards the ancient golem with a face full of excitement. It wasn't until Meow Meow climbed up and drilled into the giant robot's protective mirror that some people couldn't help but change their expressions. Meow Meow, who had successfully drilled into the Light Messenger's internal cockpit, stepped on a 6-pointed star magic circle and felt that its whole body had fused with the Light Messenger. Then its magic power was quickly drained. Every second, a part of its magic power would be lost. Realizing that it didn't have much time, Meow Meow didn't hesitate to control the Light Messenger to run towards the Frost Emperor. Even though the Light Messenger was big enough, it was still not as big as the Frost Emperor. However, duelists never shoot without aim. Angus Jeffrey felt threatened and immediately shouted, "Frost Emperor, dodge. No, Emperor hibernates." Angus Jeffrey released his magic power and remotely controlled the blue magic ball to fly into the Frost Emperor's mouth. When the Frost Scepter was taken away, he decisively gave up on the idea of letting the Frost Emperor end the battle. He chose to retreat and defend. As long as he didn't lose, he would be able to win with a stronger deck. In other words, the strong will always be strong. After the Frost Emperor swallowed the blue magic ball, it didn't hesitate to use its ultimate skill. Emperor hibernates. It stood on the spot and closed its eyes to sleep. Its magic power, which was less than 2,000 points, jumped to a little over 2,600 points the moment Emperor's hibernation took effect. However, after hibernating, the Frost Emperor became a live target. Angus Jeffrey didn't think that Dake's dream demon would be able to make the Frost Emperor lose half of its magic power. As long as it wasn't that strange method, the Frost Emperor wouldn't fall and could easily last 2 rounds. In these 2 rounds, he could accumulate cards and wait for the Frost Emperor to wake up. Then he could complete the counterattack. However, when the Light Messenger, under Meow Meow's control, quickly approached and pulled out a red greatsword from the ground, his confidence was shaken. Dake Diming's holy sword was so amazing that he instinctively felt that the sword pulled out by Meow Meow was no small matter. He had to admit that his suspicions were very accurate. Meow. Come out, wishful godly sword. The Light Messenger grabbed the wishful godly sword and raised it up high. As Meow Meow's magic power was quickly drained, the greatsword exploded with an intense golden light, turning into a greatsword of light. The Light Messenger's attack power increased from 2,500 to 3,000 points. A strange flush appeared on Meow Meow's face, but its magic power that was about to run out reminded it not to enjoy the sword too much. Thus, it controlled the Light Messenger to raise the wishful godly sword and slash down at the Frost Emperor. Meow. Wishful godly sword. The edge of the great sword of light suddenly exploded with magic power like flames. The moment Meow Meow slashed down, it took a step forward, and the wishful godly sword, that was taller than the Frost Emperor's head, slashed down. Boom. The flaming sword didn't feel any resistance at all. It was as if the Emperor Fat of the Frost Emperor had never existed. The Emperor Penguin's gigantic body was easily sliced in half by the sword light that shone like a gear. Angus Jeffrey's eyes suddenly became bloodshot. Impossible. Along with the shouts of being unable to accept reality, there was also a terrifying pain that felt as if one's heart and bones had been gouged out. When the Frost Emperor was sliced in half, the blue magic conducting ball that had been swallowed by the Frost Emperor hit the blade of the Frost Emperor. The shattered life barrier couldn't withstand the power of the wishful godly sword at all. Not only did the life barrier completely shatter, even the tough magic conducting ball was sliced in half. As the Frost Emperor's body fell to the 2 sides and shattered into countless sparkling magic power, the magic conducting ball that had been sliced in half appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The referee, who was slow to react, had a look of fear on his face. After a while, he hurriedly blew the whistle. The nobles in the circular hallway instantly let out loud cries of surprise. Even the noble madam was drenched in sweat. Cheers and discussions instantly filled the entire center of the hall. Those who cared about Dake smiled knowingly. However, in the dual domain that was surrounded by gray flames, the true danger had only just begun. Dake Dimming didn't let down his guard just because he won this duel. He didn't even put away the magic conducting fairy in the arena. Instead, he stared at Angus Jeffrey, who was on the other side of the arena. Angus Jeffrey had been holding his head and screaming ever since the life barrier of the blue magic conducting ball was shattered. Dake thought that Angus Jeffrey would gradually stop screaming. However, Angus Jeffrey's screams were getting more and more intense, to the point that it made one's hair stand on end. Dark subconsciously furrowed his brows as he recalled the terrified expression of the defeated duelist in the duel with Angus Jeffrey. Could it be that the initiator of the dual domain will suffer even more pain and backlash after losing? He didn't act rashly. Instead, he took out the remaining cards from the slots and placed them all in his hands. It was at this moment that the gray flame on Angus Jeffrey's forehead danced wildly in the wind like a fiery demon. Angus Jeffrey held his head and screamed in pain. The gray flame spread downwards and covered his entire body in an instant. It was burning wildly around his body. The flames around the arena also started dancing wildly, as if they were resonating with the flame. An indescribable atmosphere of fanaticism rose in the dual domain. 7. 5 and 115,000 plus, 136/233. Babies, cast your minimum monthly votes in razor blades. Yeah. 3. I counted wrong last time. This time, there are less than 100 chapters left. Chapter 519. Looking at the wildly dancing flames, Dake narrowed his eyes and gradually felt a sense of familiarity. It was only when he turned his gaze back to Angus Jeffrey that he suddenly realized how similar the scene in front of him was to the Demon King execution ceremony. Angus Jeffrey, who was surrounded by gray flames, was like a burning Demon King's corpse. The dancing flames around the field were the spectators who were affected by the enchantment. But in the blink of an eye, Dake realized that this was actually a common scene in events such as rituals and speeches. In fact, it was not rare. The only common point that needed to be noted was the word ritual. Whether it was the dark duel in Dake's memory or the dual domain in front of him, in fact, they all had the shadow of a ritual. Now that the ritual had reached its end, the final result was about to be revealed. As the final victor of this duel, he only needed to wait patiently to enjoy the fruits of victory. What he should be worried about was the taste of the fruit. Would it be sour or sweet? Website: https://mvipcanchu. VIP. He did not have to wait for too long. The wildly burning gray flames around Angus Jeffrey's body swept upwards like a whirlwind, and all of them left his body. Angus Jeffrey's blood-curdling screams abruptly disappeared at this moment. But his whole body seemed to have completely lost all strength and became dispirited. Even his hands that were holding his head fell limply to the ground. The gray flames continued to rise into the sky, as if taking away something that was difficult to see. Only the flame on his forehead was still burning. Did his memory get taken away? Dake frowned as he pondered. He saw the gray flame on Angus Jeffrey's forehead suddenly rise, the originally vigorous flame becoming extremely thin and long. Then, the flame suddenly curled up like a snake, and when it curled up to its limit, it instantly shot out. The flame connected to the tail of Angus Jeffrey's forehead, and was completely pulled out. Angus Jeffrey, who was originally dispirited, suddenly let out a scream. His entire body straightened due to this stimulation. And then the twisted expression on his face relaxed without any warning. His half-opened eyes were empty. Only then did the flames in the entire dual domain gather towards the gray flame that had returned to its original state. The gray flame absorbed the flames in a frenzy. In just a few seconds, it had swallowed all the flames. The color of the flame also became more solid. Dake stared at the flame. Suddenly he felt his magic power pulsate. He subconsciously reached out his hand. The flame suddenly disappeared, and when it condensed again, it was already in his palm. He reflexively wanted to retract his hand, but the flame did not emit any heat. Instead, a trace of coldness was transmitted to his palm, causing him to be shocked. Then, following that slight chill, as if he was absorbing information from a magic card, fragments of information suddenly appeared in his mind. Dake quickly digested the information, and a look of understanding gradually appeared on his face. Afterward, he gathered magic power in his 5 fingers and suddenly clenched his fist, squeezing the gray flame out of shape. However, the flame was not extinguished. Instead, it slipped through the gaps between his fingers and condensed into a new shape. Dake's eyebrows twitched, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He did not know why. The gray flame did not enter Angus Jeffrey's body like it did with Angus Jeffrey. In fact, this did not conform to its nature. Of course, it could also be that it wanted to but could not. As the gray flame was taken away by Dake, the dual domain that Angus Jeffrey had launched naturally disappeared. The strange atmosphere that filled the arena quickly disappeared without a trace. No one knew that a dark duel had taken place under the watchful eyes of the public, and no one knew what Angus Jeffrey had experienced before and after the duel. Dake raised his head and looked across. Angus Jeffrey's eyelids were twitching, and his empty eyes were being filled by some kind of consciousness. When he suddenly blinked his eyes, it was as if he had received a huge shock, and he suddenly screamed. Then he pressed down on the card table, cold sweat dripping down. Dake frowned and probed, "Senior Jeffrey?" The friendly greeting that was transmitted through the loudspeaker was received by Angus Jeffrey as usual. He seemed to understand that he was in the middle of a duel. No, after the second duel he still lost miserably. However, in his memory there was obviously nothing related to the gray flame. "I lost again?" Angus Jeffrey raised his hand and pressed his forehead. He only felt as if there was a huge hole in his heart, an endless emptiness swept over him. He interpreted it as the disappointment after losing to Dake. He gritted his teeth and replied, "You won this time, but you won't always win." As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed the magic card and walked towards the stairs with a slight stumble. Looking at his back as he gradually walked down the platform, Dake pursed his lips and recalled his magic elves back into the card. Then he turned around and walked down the platform. The gray flame floated beside him, following him as he continued to descend. Dake walked to the ground and looked at Olga, who was waiting with a smile. He whispered, "Let's go." Then, without waiting for Jessica to lead the way, the two quickly left the arena. After they walked out of the circular corridor, they came face to face with some familiar-looking nobles. However, Dake didn't have the leisure to pretend to be polite with these nobles who he didn't know when he would cross paths with. He casually said that he was a little tired, and pushed away the nobles who were making exaggerated remarks. Then he quickly found Panduola and Aurora. Phyllis, who was next to them, exclaimed, "Dake, what was that golem you summoned at the end? Angus Fat Penguin couldn't block it at all." "It's a type of armor." Dake smiled. At the mention of armor, Phyllis couldn't help but cover her mouth and say, "It's the Valkyrie. I mean the Duke. Did she teach you?" Dake nodded and said, "Of course." Then Olga, who was walking behind him, suddenly took a step forward and whispered something in his ear. Dake looked surprised and then said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Phyllis. I might have something to do and have to go back. Tonight's dinner will be on you next time." Phyllis looked at the head maid, who had already looked up with interest, and said, "No problem. But the next time I invite you, don't refuse." "Of course not." Dake smiled. Then he took Pandora and Aurora and quickly left the Haunting by Dreams clubhouse. When the four of them got back into the carriage, Panduola asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Dake said, "I suddenly remembered that there's a farewell party for you tonight." "Didn't you say to do it tonight?" Panduola's lips curled up. Dake smiled and said, "I suddenly feel that it's better to do it earlier." Panduola said, "All right then. There's nothing interesting in this hall anyway." The carriage fell into silence. Aurora looked at the two people beside her curiously and didn't say anything. The carriage quickly left the haunting hall's garden and went on the road to the Duke's mansion. As the sun set in the west and dusk arrived, the pedestrians on the road became more hurried. When the sky outside the window was completely swallowed by the orange-red sunset, there were fewer and fewer people and carriages on the road. The dragon tamer who was driving the carriage lit up the lights on both sides of the carriage door and slowed down. Only at this moment did Dark extend his hand. His 5 fingers clenched as the gray flame gathered at the center of his palm. Panduola looked at his movements curiously and asked, "In your palm?" "Yes." Dake nodded and said, "A gray flame." Panduola shook his head and said, "I can't see it." Aurora couldn't help but ask, "What can't you see?" Dake took a breath and said, "Let's wait a little longer." Before night fell, the carriage finally arrived at the Duke's mansion. When the dragon-horned horse slowly stopped, the 4 people in the carriage walked out one after another. Dake dismissed the maidservants who came to welcome them and quickly entered the mansion. At this time, the Duke's mansion was still brightly lit. The maidservants of the Ares Palace maidservants were still preparing the dishes for the farewell party. Arvette and the others, who had eaten a little, were drinking tea and chatting in the living room. Dake saw the lights in the room and walked up to the second floor. He pushed open the door and entered. "You're back." Arvette saw a treasure that she hadn't seen during the day, and naturally revealed a happy expression. Did you bring Panduola out to play? Claire casually teased. Hephaestus sipped her tea and smiled. But that smile quickly disappeared. The three of them were very sensitive and noticed that the atmosphere was strange. Dake nodded at them and quickly walked to the center of the living room and sat down in front of the tea table. Panduola walked to Hephaestus and sat down. Aurora sat next to Arvette. Katja. Olga locked the door from the inside and walked over. Dake waited for everyone to gather before grabbing the gray flame in his hand. He slowly opened his palm and said solemnly, "Can you see it?" Among the three people present, one was the Valkyrie, who stood at the peak 10 years ago, another was the famous Sage of the Beasts, and the last one was a pure-blooded white dragon with the true dragon's eye. If even they couldn't see this gray flame, it meant that even in the underworld, it was definitely an extraordinary item. However, the worst situation did not occur. Apart from Claire, Arvette and Hephaestus clearly had witnessed expressions on their faces. Thus Claire complained, "So what did you see?" Arvette's expression relaxed and said, "I couldn't see much. It was just a blurry black shadow." Hephaestus glanced at her and immediately smiled. "Then I can see more. Wait a moment." Evidently, she was very happy that she had surpassed the Valkyrie in a certain ability. Hephaestus looked at the gray flame in Dake's hand again, and slowly opened her eyes. As the magic power gathered, white light appeared in her eyes. Her pupils suddenly disappeared, and two beams of white light suddenly shot out from her eyes. With a thought, Dake took the initiative to put the flame in front of Hephaestus' gaze. After being shined on by that gaze, the gray flame took on the shape of a black shadow. However, from its outline, it could be seen that it was a flame. Claire asked in surprise, "Where did you get this flame?" Dake slowly explained what had happened today. "Wait, you said that this is the spoils of war from your duel with the Jeffrey family's son?" Claire interrupted him and asked, "Then where did the Jeffrey family's son obtain this flame?" Dake took a deep breath and said, "The information I obtained was very limited, but if I'm not wrong, it should have been leaked from the underworld." "From the underworld?" Claire asked curiously. "Could it be the underworld fire?" Dake said, "Before we truly understand its origin, we can temporarily call it the underworld fire." "Wait a moment." Arvette interrupted the conversation again and said solemnly, "Did Angus Jeffrey take the initiative to challenge you to a duel?" "Yes." Dake nodded. "This is the second time." Arvette frowned and said, "Did he target you in the academy?" Dake smiled slightly. "It seems so, but I don't have any impression of it." "Is that so?" Arvette said. "According to what you said, although Angus Jeffrey was possessed by the underworld fire, he didn't lose his consciousness. It was just that his personality became more extreme, and he was filled with an inexplicable obsession with duels." Dark looked at the gray flame and placed it on the tip of his finger. He shook it slightly and said slowly, "In fact, I obtained some fragmented memories from this underworld fire. This underworld fire is very likely the manifestation of some individual consciousness fragment, and it's only a small part of it. Because that individual consciousness has a strong obsession with duels, it was able to create a dual ritual ability after possessing Jeffrey's body. And its duel shouldn't be referring to a magician's duel. Its original consciousness was likely pointing to a duel between gladiators, or a duel between knights. It's just that in this era, magician's duel has almost monopolized the definition of duel. So when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Well, actually, I'm just guessing. It's also possible that the duel in Jeffrey's mind was a magician's duel." Dake's eyes reflected the flames as he continued. "Jeffrey was possessed by the underworld fire when he was watching the Demon King's execution ceremony. It's very likely that there are many people like him who have been possessed. If the possessed person is a warrior, the so-called duel might be a real battle of swords and spears. At present, it seems that the person possessed by the underworld fire is extremely aggressive, causing the possessed person to have the desire to duel with others. Of course, we can't rule out the possibility that there are people with strong willpower who can restrain this impulse. And if you can win in a duel, not only can you extract the memories related to the underworld fire from the loser's mind, But you can also take away a portion of the abilities related to the type of duel. When used in a magician's duel, what is taken away is a portion of magic power and a portion of knowledge. Angus Jeffrey took away a lot of magic power and knowledge from the duelists over the past few days of duels. If you give him enough time to accumulate and digest it, he might become more difficult to deal with. In short, I call this kind of duel a dark duel. With Dake's tireless explanation, the other three finally realized the danger hidden under the magician's duel. Olga couldn't help but clench her fists. She was clearly only one platform away from the young master, but she didn't notice the dual domain at all. If the young master wasn't outstanding enough, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Panduola and Aurora's eyebrows twitched as they listened. After some slight regret, Panduola couldn't help but look into Hephaestus' eyes. She originally didn't care about the true dragon's eye, but now she had a desire. Perhaps we should seriously explore the mysteries contained within the dragon blood? While Panduola was frowning in thought, Aurora was also worried about her own lack of ability. She originally had a certain degree of confidence in her own abilities, but after coming to the Duke's mansion, that confidence had dwindled. She clenched her teeth and set a goal for herself. A dark duel? After careful consideration, Arvette said worriedly. If it's really like what you said, things will become very troublesome. At that time, the crowd gathered around St. Louis Square came from all over the world. Not only were there a large number of subhumans, but there were also remnants of the demon race and people from the evil church. If they obtain the ability to start a dark duel, it's not that pessimistic. Claire shook her head. The Holy Church held a holy inquisition for this, and they might even use this to start a new holy war. Arvette couldn't help but roll her eyes. That's even more troublesome. After saying that, she unexpectedly calmly turned to Dake and asked, "So after you won the dark duel, you also obtained part of Jeffrey's magic and knowledge?" However, Dake shook his head and said, "No. I only got a few fragmented memories. Apart from Angus Jeffrey's experience, there was only a special spell. After Jeffrey used the magic language to compile it, he combined it with the power of the Underworld Flame to create 2 magic cards called the Underworld Monument. Of course, those 2 magic cards are now useless." "Why is that?" Claire asked. Dake also rolled his eyes at her and said, "Of course it's because I didn't accept the possession of the Underworld Flame." Claire laughed. "Of course I know, I just want to hear it from you." Dake sighed and said, "Actually, I'm more worried about what the Underworld Flame can obtain from the dark duel itself. I keep feeling that it's bigger than when Jeffrey first obtained it." Claire said, "According to what you said, it could be magic or it could be something else." Dake said, "Besides, have you ever thought that if 2 people who are also possessed by the Underworld Flame were to duel?" Claire said decisively, "No matter who wins or loses, the Underworld Flame of one person will be absorbed by the other person's Underworld Flame. It will continue to grow, and eventually," Dake said worriedly, "in the end, it's likely to awaken its own consciousness. Moreover, as the Underworld Flame grows bigger, it's very likely that the possessed person will obtain more special abilities from it. In this way, they will take the initiative to find other possessed people. It's like raising poisonous insects, and the final winner will be the king of poisonous insects." Claire shrugged. "That sounds very threatening. But don't you have an Underworld Flame in your hands? Who knows, maybe you'll be the king of poisonous insects in the end," Dake said helplessly. "I'll repeat myself, I didn't accept the possession of the Underworld Flame." Claire laughed. "Then have you ever thought about why you can see it, but we can't?" Dake's tone suddenly became sluggish, and he said hesitantly, "Maybe it's because I won the duel. According to the rules of the duel, I obtained the ownership of this Underworld Flame." He used his index finger to draw a circle, and the Underworld Flame followed his finger in a circle, looking like an obedient puppy. Arvette frowned. "No matter what, you have to be careful. If the Underworld Flame acts strangely, immediately tell Mother. If you're in the academy, go find Headmaster Aertii. Right now, we don't know anything about the Underworld Flame, so we have to be careful." Dake nodded and said, "In fact, the most troublesome thing about the Underworld Flame is that we don't know anything about it. Apart from the two of you, no one else can sense it. Indeed, our vet said. Otherwise, we could have searched out all the possessed people and conducted a planned experiment on the fusion of the underworld's fire. However, from what we've seen so far, this is basically impossible. But you don't have to worry too much. Even if the sky falls, Mother will hold it up. Dake couldn't help but reply, okay. The invisibility of the underworld flame made it very difficult to find the possessed people, and the nature of this raising poisonous insects made it unsuitable for it to be made public. Otherwise, it would only speed up the process of raising poisonous insects. After Arvet and Claire gained a clear understanding of some of the characteristics of the underworld's flames through Dark's hands, they temporarily put this matter aside. They didn't forget that there was a farewell party for Hephaestus and Panduola tonight. Hephaestus and Panduola didn't change their minds about leaving because of this sudden incident. At 8 o'clock sharp, the banquet hall was filled with all kinds of delicacies. Then Dake and the others entered the hall with the magic elves. Tonight's banquet wasn't as formal as Dake's birthday party, and only their own people attended. The magic elves ran around the hall cheerfully, adding a lively atmosphere to the farewell party. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, everyone got on the stage and started dancing. Halfway through the dance, Panduola quietly pulled Dake out of the dance floor. The young boy and girl went to the balcony. The warm summer night breeze caressed their cheeks, and the bright moon hung in the night sky, their faces red. Tonight's moonlight is so beautiful. 3 in 1 6000 plus, 137/233. From today until the 3rd of July, you can't edit any text, so you can't insert any pictures. /heartsuit/ that you're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.